386-9023 and use code 104091 *.
Se ofrecen servicios de interpretación en español para esta reunión del Consejo Municipal por teléfono. Marque el número 720-386-9023 y utilice el código 104091 #.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. City Clerk is the host of the Zoom meeting. Speakers will be able to unmute themselves when recognized. Time is now 6 p.m., so we'll get this study session called to order. First up is a presentation on the E470 Authority Roadshow. I'll invite Jason Rogers, City Manager, to introduce the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to bring up and recognize Mr. John Dack, who sits on the E470 board as their chair, as well as the new Executive Director, Bo Memory, who joins us from the great state of North Carolina. They are coming before you all to provide you an update as it relates to their programs, operations, as well as the future of E470, and particularly through the cities, borders, and districts. So, by all means, Mr. Memory.
Now, I have to ask, since he's from North Carolina, how many national championships does North Carolina have?
I only recognize maybe 0, but they will tell you something different.
And how does that contrast to how many Virginia has?
You know, it only takes 1 to be recognized, so I will say great 1.
Thank you so much for having us here tonight. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us tonight. Again, my name is Bo Memory. I come to E470 from, as was stated, from North Carolina, where I served as the Chief Operating Officer for the North Carolina DOT, and prior to that as the Executive Director of the North Carolina Turnpike Authority. And I think we're going to start off with just showing what we're planning to cover tonight in our update. And I think we're going to start off with the video.
This is E470 Now, where you'll hear the latest news and updates from the E470 Public Highway Authority. Work continues on the E470 road widening project from I-70 to 104th Avenue. The latest milestone is the completion of the foundation for the new 38th Avenue Bridge. Over a 5-night period, crews set 32 concrete girders on the north and southbound sides over E470. This new 38th Avenue interchange, along with another at 48th Avenue, will greatly improve connectivity and traffic flow to newly developed communities in Green Valley Ranch and the Aurora Highlands neighborhood. Keep up with other project highlights on E470.com. Another big project along the roadway is the construction of the new E470 Central Maintenance Facility. The current facility at the entrance of the Aurora Highlands development was sold to the community, and the new facility is going up just outside of the E470 administration headquarters off of Stephen D. Hogan Parkway. Once complete, the facility will be able to accommodate maintenance needs for the added lanes and interchanges from the current road widening project, and will feature offices, a storage barn for solid de-icer, snow plow bays, and more. Summer months are finally here, but let's take a look back on your toll dollars at work during the 2022-2023 snow season. During 72 days of active snow and ice operations, E470 plows traveled over 130,000 miles to remove snow and ice along the corridor and applied more than 3,600 tons of solid de-icer, along with 331,000 gallons of liquid de-icer. These numbers show E470's commitment to help keep your commute safe and reliable year-round. E470 is also committed to safety through its charitable arm, the Transportation Safety Foundation. In June, the foundation held its largest fundraising event, the biennial TSF Golf Tournament. This year, 28 sponsors helped the foundation reach a record-breaking year, raising more than $90,000. The money will help fund grants for nonprofit organizations that support transportation safety programs and education. Each year, E470 is proud to invest in the communities along its corridor by sponsoring family-friendly events in each of its member jurisdictions. In May, E470 sponsored the grand opening of the Adams County Veterans Memorial, and in June, participated in the Parker Days Festival. Later this year, you will also find E470 at the Adams County, Arapahoe County, and Douglas County fairs, and more. We'll see you there. That's all for this edition of E470 Now. Be sure and stay connected with E470 and Express Toll on social media. Until next time, thanks for watching.
There's one simple hearing hack anyone can use to improve their hearing almost overnight. Did you know that hearing impairments have nothing to do with your ears? The ears are nothing more than...
That was for me. We have something on E470 now.
I know the council is familiar with E470 and its long history in the community, but I'd like to introduce John Dyack, our chair, to go through some background information on the authority.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is John Dyack. I'm board chair of E470. This is my second year as board chair. I've been an 11-year council member from the town of Parker, and we miss Jason Rogers, so you have quite a gentleman here. Truly appreciate his efforts in Parker and miss seeing him around town. So thank you, Jason. This right here just signifies what E470 is about, our mission vision. We just improve your journey through safety, service, and stewardship and reliability. We truly believe that, and we've been so blessed to have numerous people, board members, such as Councilmember Hurst, former Councilmember Douglas. I just met out in the lobby, and just a lot of quality people. About us, we're a political subdivision. We were formed in 1985. The PHA, or the Public Highway Authority law, in Colorado was passed in '87, and the authority became established January 13th of 1988. We work in a committee format. Councilmember Hurst is chair of our operations committee. Every metric and service type of issue goes through the operations committee, so we're thankful for his service. We have 8 voting members. As you can see, we have 3 counties, and we have 5 local municipalities, including Commerce City. Background, we are 47 miles. I was, in a previous life, I owned a land surveying company, and in 1990, we created a relationship with E470 to design and build the roadway. So we opened the tollway in 1991, we opened up in totality in 2003. So with that, we are 100% toll funded. We have no tax that comes to us. We have $1.3 billion in outstanding bond debt. We have $1.4 billion in capital improvements. Our annual debt payment is $100 million, and we hope to pay that off by 2041. This kind of illustrates our traffic. As you can see, with COVID in 2020, it went down significantly, but the purple line at the top shows you that we're rebounding, which I believe is a good thing. Reducing tolls and eliminating fees. Our goal is to manage this like a business. We do not want to bear a significant burden on our customers, which are your constituents. So we had a toll reduction here right after COVID, and we froze it last year, and the hope is to not be in a position to raise it for many years, if ever. With this, we try to be a regional partner. We partner with a number of municipalities, our voting members, on projects. As you can see, Commerce City, Tower Road, and Payne Ramp was one of those, and the 120th Avenue interchange signals was another, close to Commerce City. But we endeavored to partner with municipalities to try to improve transportation within the E470 corridor and surrounding areas. And with that, I will give it back to Bo.
Thank you. As John said, we have a robust capital program. We're anticipating investing more than $500 million in the next 5 years back into the facility and the surrounding communities. Those projects include the ongoing road widening project and new interchanges to stay ahead of development, trail extensions, and new technologies to improve customer service. Our current road widening project is from I-70 to 104th Avenue, roughly 11 miles. We hope to be complete with this project in 2025, and the project includes interchange improvements at 38th, 48th, 64 Pena Boulevard, and of course, an expansion of the trails. Looking forward, in the Commerce City area, we have some planned projects, including a new interchange at 88th and 112th. Also, we are hoping that we have E470 has leased out the toll plaza that currently sits empty in the Commerce City area. We're hoping to have that leased out for development, including new service stations and new service plazas. As I mentioned, we're widening the trail system through this part of the region. Roughly 4.5 miles will be added to the current 12.5-mile system we built. And here you can see the trails that are currently under construction as part of this widening project. The segment in red is a segment that we are still working with jurisdictions that have responsibility and own the property in that region to come to terms with how we'll move forward and construct trails in that area. But there is a plan to connect those trails through that roughly 4-mile gap. Here you can see a bit closer some of the challenges we have there as we go through multiple jurisdictions, including DIA and Denver. With the freezing of the toll rates this year, we continued our three-axle plus discount program. The program aims to get commercial vehicles off of the facility during prime drive time hours and off neighboring facilities and onto E470 where we can better manage that traffic. E470 was also recently named a hazmat route to get those materials off of our local jurisdiction's streets. And at E470, we are committed to safety. We are putting new investments in our wrong-way driver prevention program, adding new cable barrier to prevent crossover accidents. And as you saw in the video, we put quite a bit of effort this past winter into snow removal. But we also provide safety services as well. If you're on the facility and you encounter, you run out of gas, you have a tire go flat, we're there to help you. Last year, we responded to more than 12,000 roadside assistance calls and provide drivers a great deal of support to, one, keep traffic flowing, but also get those drivers out of harm's way. It's never a safe thing to be on the side of a 75-mile-an-hour facility. To access those services, we've recently implemented the Star 470 program, where all you have to do on your mobile device is dial Star 470, and within about 10 minutes, we'll have someone there to assist you. We take our role as an environmental steward very seriously. We put a great deal of effort into improving water quality with a lot of public outreach on that topic. And we've also put a great deal of effort into our electric vehicle charging program. We recently upgraded the chargers we offer free to the public at our headquarters to high-speed chargers. And we look to expand that program with our toll plaza redevelopment program. We also use a great deal of solar power. We have currently 15 solar arrays, and we've been in this for about 11 years, and we hope to expand that program with our central maintenance facility construction. In 2022, we processed 132 million transactions. That includes not just 80 million transactions off E470, but another 50 million transactions that we processed for the other toll facilities in the state of Colorado. And our surveys show us that our customers appreciate the support that they're given. They rate us at more than 4 stars, nearly 5. And with that, John and I are happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Appreciate that presentation. Does anybody on council have any questions? Councilmember Kim.
Really appreciate the presentation overall. Can you go back as far as, can you go back to the, what improvements were there again that you were referencing within the Commerce City boundaries?
So right now in our master plan, we've got 2 planned interchange improvements. And then the service plazas at the old toll plaza, we'll refer to it as Toll Plaza D, but that's in the Commerce City area.
Awesome.
There's also 2 other projects. There's also 2 other projects that you may want to ask about.
Apparently one of your board members here, or I believe board member, that talked about there's 2 other projects that we're not aware of?
No, I think what John Dyack presented was the 120th signals and the Tower Pena interchange
Oh,
that
yes.
we participated in.
Yeah, I apologize. Those were on a previous slide, so.
Okay. How often do you guys typically have these board meetings? And I guess who's on the board? I know Councilmember Hurst is, but who else is on the board? I missed that.
Ah, there we go.
There it is. Okay.
One from each representative.
One from each representative? Okay. Yeah, I mean, these seem like pretty good projects overall that are coming through, especially within the city. I wish we had a deal, more of an update on a monthly basis or whatever the case may be. Hopefully that could be done moving forward. I do appreciate the trails that you're putting out there. As one who's actually rode 100 miles from the Denver proper all the way around, I'd like to see that finished out myself as an avid bike rider. So,
Absolutely.
thank you very much for the presentation.
Just a follow-up to the trail, Councilmember Kim. Parker has been very, very involved in trying to create a connection at the very end of E470. For the last number of years, E470 has a trail system that goes perpendicular to the tollway, and we had to in Parker figure out a way to connect that into the Cherry Creek and Centennial Trails. So we worked with 7 other municipalities and organizations to create what one of our members says it's the United Nations of trails. It's an overpass over Parker Road to create that connection so you can have that ability to go beyond.
Yeah, I've actually had to ride over that area as well as part of that whole 100-mile loop I used to do a while ago. But yeah, something I'll be doing again in the future. Looking forward to the actual trail expansion as well. So thank you.
We are too. Thank you. And if any of the council members ever have questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly or John or our Director of Public Affairs, Jessica Carson, who's here with us tonight as well.
Councilmember Noble?
I like the toll plaza redevelopment with EV chargers. That's really a great idea. I don't quite understand 112th and 88. What do you mean by diamond interchanges? Are those going to be exit ramps, ingress, egress ramps?
The design there is a bit complicated. The current design, as it was originally envisioned, because of the toll plaza that sits right there in the middle between those interchanges, there's not enough room for proper egress and ingress from the facility. So there is a service road design that goes on either side of the plaza that connects the 96th Avenue and 88th Avenue interchanges. Now, your staff has been in contact with us. We understand that they have some concerns and have some data that we will obviously look at and work with the city on as we go forward to how those actually get developed and built out.
And what was the point of doing that? Why did that become part of your plan?
This current design?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that was the way it was originally designed back in the 90s.
Okay.
But I think it was to make sure that there was room at those toll plazas for traffic to get in and out at a safe speed.
And what is the status of the exit off of E470 for Sable?
Sable, that's a great question. That is moving along. That project's moving forward. I'll have to get back to the exact date. I don't want to give you the wrong one, but we've got the IGAs in place to move that forward.
Okay, and that'll be by the government center.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Douglas?
Thank you, Mayor Huesman. Thank you so much for the presentation this evening. I really appreciate it. I'm trying to make this so it's not making noise by vibrating. A lot of the questions that I had, Councilmember Noble just asked, so I appreciate her asking those and you answering them. I had a question on the solar arrays. You said there were 15, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Let's see if I can get to that slide. They are located at different locations along the corridor, including our headquarters building. We're looking to expand that to our central maintenance facility that's newly being constructed now to put those on that site as well.
Okay, and what is an array?
It's simply an installation of, it's essentially a site where we have solar panels.
Solar panels
Yes, ma'am.
installed. And once that energy is collected, how is it used?
Mostly it's used to offset our current energy usage.
So that would be like at your admin building?
At our
or-
headquarters building, for our toll plaza sites, and for some of our for actually running some of the toll equipment off of. We put that back into the system.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for answering that question, and I appreciate the fact that you have initiated something like that and implemented it. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you for coming to present. I know we've talked about this, just continued updates, especially as we continue to move the major infrastructure projects north of I-70. I will say that the city and E470 staff has been talking for more than a year now about the Himalaya and the between 96 and 88th interchange. And it's just kind of your traditional transportation planning challenges as development's happening. It's different than the master plan that was imagined 30 plus years ago. And so I don't think it's a significant red flag. It's just something that has to be worked through as, you know, the city's vision for development and E470's division or long-term vision for development kind of overlaps, and trying to find solutions that work in modern day is the biggest key there. I will say I have a high level of respect for the board and what E470 does. The board consistently in the 3.5 years that I've been participating there has consistently looked to keep costs down, find ways to be innovative. And as you could see, as everybody else was raising, you know, costs, E470 kept theirs frozen. And right before that, had lowered the tolls across the entire toll road. And there's plans to do that again, but obviously it has to make economic sense both for you know, the projects for today and kind of the expansion as development happens on the corridor, but also ensuring that there's enough to pay off that long-term debt and keep the authority in a good financial position to pay off the debt as quickly as possible. So just want to say I appreciate my time there. I've learned a lot, and I really do think I've gained a lot of respect for the process where I came in a little unsure about what to expect at E470. I really do think that the mindset is at least appropriate, trying to serve our communities that you saw listed on the slides.
Any other comments, questions? All right, thank you all for your time. Appreciate you being here. All right, let's move on to reports. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor. As you all are aware, our ARPA survey is now complete. We actually have those results on our webpage. The city is still taking comments on the results itself. It has a comment box in which residents or those who are interested stakeholders can continue to provide additional feedback or thoughts on how to use the remaining funds. The comment/feedback box will be open until September 14th, which we will then bring all information, including that feedback, the City Council at a future study session on September 25th. Like to be able to promote a sales and use tax seminar, our city tax division on Tuesday, September 12th from 9 a.m. to noon in the Creststone Room at the Bison Ridge Rec Center. We'll be holding a free seminar dedicated for business owners, accountants, and tax professionals on the city sales and use tax code. This is an in-person seminar that allows tax representatives from Commerce City to answer questions and provide guidance towards preparing a business's city tax returns efficiently and correctly. If there is interest, we are asking individuals to RSVP by Friday, September 8th. Spanish interpretation will be provided at this event as well, and or in advance as a request. With Council's most recent approval of funding for grant writing purposes, the city has released an RFP for those services to aid in our research and securing grants related to various areas, including housing, transportation, environmental initiatives, parks, recreation, and public safety. To that, I do have some additional updates on our grants office, which we have started to stand up and will be open for business September 1st. Training is underway and will continue through next week. We have a grants manager position in which we are finalizing that will be posted on our website so that we can have someone overseeing various functions. The grant office has set up internal processes to be able to make sure that we are operating within our staff to be able to achieve, once again, a number of hopefully successful grants across these various interests. And we're working on a policy as well that will help aid and support staff in this effort. With community development, we are currently reviewing RFP proposals to support improvements to urban design, to accommodate all modes of traffic and transportation, and to improve ways to cross Highway 2 up to 104th Avenue as part of the Highway 2 corridor study. That was funded as part of the MyC3 request that was brought back to you all in February. We were able to get some proposals, and we're excited to hopefully get that going here by Q3. Another project that was funded by the MyC3 was the contract for a comprehensive review and development of new public gateway, directional, and wayfinding signage throughout the city. We are now under contract with MERGE and will begin that process. With Public Works, you all have probably seen out at the intersection of Highway 2 and 96, the work that's begun with BNSF to replace the track crossing at that location. That work began just yesterday, and we are believed to be on schedule still for September 2nd completion. If that does change, obviously we will make sure that the community and or others are up to speed and aware, but as it stands right now, we are still on schedule on having that intersection back open for public. And at last, for Public Works, staff has submitted a grant for the widening of East 88th Avenue. That grant request is for approximately $16.8 million. If awarded, that would fully fund that project and allow us to be able to move forward with that construction. You all have probably seen various portions of Second Creek Trail close and reopening. That is due to the Metro Water Recovery project. Our team is working with Metro Water on being able to get that trail back open, and we have asked for them to take the necessary steps of getting that open as soon as possible, but obviously within a safe manner. We hope to have more information by the end of this week from them as to what their plan and their approach to accomplishing that, but wanted you at least to be aware, part of it's already started, as you've seen, with the underpass at 104th and 2nd Creek. That's been opened back up. So we're going to remain due diligent on working with them to accomplish that. And then last, out of PD, the Kurt Hahn Golf Tournament, have to tip my hat to all of those in attendance, as well as PD and QCF on putting on a heck of a golf tournament for the community, and obviously in memoriam of Officer Holland. It raised nearly $10,000 in the silent auction, and it's anticipated that the total raise will be around $80,000. So that's awesome. It's hard to say in words what the loss has led to, but we continue to support, we continue to remember, and we'll never forget Officer Holland and the impact that he continues to have on this organization and the community. So have to tip my hat. And last, PD is gearing up for FISH and the large number of officers that will be required for that event. So we are beginning our preparation for the annual event. And if you have any concerns or issues, we will make sure that there is ways to be able to communicate with PD sufficiently. And with that, that ends my report for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Do any council members have any questions for the city manager, Mr. Rogers? Councilmember Kim?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just a quick question regarding back to the railroad construction that's going on right now. So I do recall that we had talked about this previously about potentially bringing Union Pacific and BNSF up front in October. Have you had any headway with that?
We have. We've gotten a tentative commitment from one. We have not received a response from the other. So BNSF has tentatively committed themselves to coming before us. They would like to do so in partnership with Union Pacific. We're still awaiting a response from them. So hopefully we're able to move that forward. One way or the other, before we get to October, we will let you know. But we are trying to have contact with them at least once a week to see whether or not they're willing to participate.
Thank you very much. I'd love to have a productive partnership essentially between the other railroads and us for sure, especially within our city. So that's all I've got. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes, thank you. East 88th widening, between where and where?
That would be from 76 to Highway 2, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.
If there's any more council members, can you raise your hand that have questions? Nope. Mr. City Manager, Mr. Rogers, I had one question. Do you know what dates the Fish concert is?
It is, the exact dates would be August 31st through Monday, September 4th.
Okay, thank you, because our block prepares for then also for barking. Thank you. Next, I would like to invite our interim city attorney, Sarah Geiger, to do her report.
I do not have anything to report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any council members wishing to make a report? I can't see. Okay. Councilmember Noble?
I'm sorry. That's why you're saying that, because you don't have that screen in front of you. I appreciate that. Okay, for anyone who's watching and is expecting a discussion about metro districts, that will not be occurring until after the Urban Renewal Authority meeting, which is to start at 7. So I just wanted to give people a heads up. Meantime, I participated in the Parks, Recreation, and Golf Master Plan meeting with the consultants. The consultants are very impressive, by the way. I also attended an air and noise, oil and gas presentation in Brighton. The City Safety Summit at Bell Creek. And I again want to call out Councilmember Kim for all of his efforts over the past several weeks in bringing attention to the issue of safety for our young people. I attended the IGO Realty groundbreaking, which will be on Adelia. This will be really wonderful to be having a business with people who were there during the day. The Detective Holland Memorial Golf Tournament was quite incredible. I was there at the beginning of it, and everyone was there during the rain, and like magic, at the moment they were supposed to tee off, the rain stopped at 7:30. And I think that was the hand of Detective Holland reaching down. However, he didn't help me with my banner bid. I think someone else got the avalanche bid, but I kept the amount really high. So, also I participated in the Metro District workshop listening session that we had on Saturday. It was very well attended and really great perspectives from a range of people and very productive. And finally, I attended the Settlers Crossing neighborhood picnic, and it was great fun meeting people who are creating community in a whole new neighborhood in Ward 4. Thank you.
Councilmember Kim?
Thank you again, Mayor Pro Tem. So last week I had the opportunity to attend the Traffic Safety Summit, provided my 2 cents into the issues that we have across Commerce City and more bigger, Adams County as a whole, with regards to right-of-ways, along with ensuring safety of our children. Had a very productive conversations that occurred in both in the north and the south of the city. In addition to talking about the safety plans that are continuously being updated from more so from the Commerce City side, and also, let me mention, Adams County as well, as a partnership still continues to evolve there. The biggest thing too is just ensuring that, the only reason, not the only reason, but we're coming to this with regards to the speed humps, speed tables that were installed was due to the death of Kara Kincaid. So I appreciate Councilwoman Noble essentially nominating me to attend those, to speak on that, along with Commissioner Odoricio and along with our staff, to include include Adams County staff that was there. With regards to Kara, I talked to, as a matter of fact, today I met with her mom today prior to actually coming here. Her mom, her dad, and also her older sister. And we're, with their approval, they're allowing me to assist with attempting to get a placard of some sort, potentially a bench or something out in the area that she was killed at. So it's in memoriam of her. So I'll be working with Adams County on that department. Additionally, too, attended the Adams 14 Educational Foundation last Thursday over Zoom. It sounds like they have a good plan moving forward with regards to, I think, a little fundraising activity to help generate some funds for Adams 14, I believe, as a whole. And then same with Councilwoman Noble. I had the opportunity to attend the Metro District listening session as well. Very productive, a lot of great information. I think Mr. Guardiola actually put it all together, consolidated. Great job on that. All in all, that's all I've got to report. Thank you.
Councilmember Chacon?
Thank you, Mayor. I know this Saturday was the Native American Housing Strategic Planning, and I know that they're still looking for a location. So if city can see if they could help support in any kind of way, they are a nonprofit, and I can give you their contacts of Bill Ziegler and Lucille Ecohawk. Specifically, that was Saturday.
If you can send me that contact information, man, would love to be able to distribute that internally and see what we can do to try to find some assistance.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And then today, Councilmember Noble and I met with EPA Region 8, and they're bringing up, we wanted to write a very strongly worded letter, and I believe it got most approval. We wanted to make sure for, frankly, the drop in the bucket that the 300K has been to address Suncor. They make $2 million a day. So how are we really being there for community? Is this a performative measure, or will there be forms of implementation and direct action that will actually respond to community, with community self-determination and input going forward? So we had really great discussions today about it, a lot of support. And I personally think that EPA is acting a lot more proactively in a way that I haven't seen them before, that I think that the city, just combining with a lot of funding that's coming through, can help especially disproportionately impacted communities. So that was all my reports for today. Thank you.
Any other council members need to make a report? All right. Mr. Rogers, would you like to discuss the Energy Equity Environmental Division quarterly update for the evening?
Yes, sir. We would like to request a deferral of that item. We have a staff member that had a loss in the family that would be presenting this matter. So out of respect, we would like to remove that item and find a future study session.
All right, our condolences to the staff member who had the loss in their family. Our next item is the Metro District regulations, which is slated to go an hour. We don't have that much time. Rather than start and stop on that, I guess we will take a 21-minute break and convene the URA meeting at 7 p.m. on the dot.
Yes, sir.
Clock, we'll go ahead and call the URA meeting to order and ask the secretary to call the roll.
Chair Huesman.
Present.
Vice Chair Allen Thomas.
Present.
Commissioner Madera. Commissioner Chacon. Commissioner Noble.
Present.
Commissioner Hurst. Commissioner Kim. Commissioner Ford. Commissioner Douglas.
Here.
Commissioner Machuga. Commissioner Tedesco. Commissioner Amador.
Here.
Chair Huesman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Now I need a motion and a second to excuse the members not present. Commissioner Kim,
So moved.
Commissioner Hurst.
I'll second.
I have a motion and second to excuse the members not present. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, do a voice vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We are now going to move into our presentations. I'll invite Bill Aiken, URA Director, forward to give the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Huesman, members of the Urban Renewal Authority of Commerce City. Tonight, we have one presentation followed by an executive session if needed to give instructions to negotiators. The presentation tonight is an update on the Mile High Greyhound Park Institutional Anchor Building, status of the project, funding of that building, and opportunities to move forward. I'd also like to announce that we have members from Adams 14 in the audience tonight, as well as members from the Ascend Performing Arts Academy in the audience tonight, in case there's any questions about interest from potential tenants or partners in this project. So quickly, we're going to go over the purpose and intent of the overall project and the institutional anchor, next steps, or where we're at in the project. We're going to go a couple slides on the project finance to talk about what we can afford with or without partners. And then last is we're going to be seeking board direction on information that's necessary to complete the RFP and to go out to market to find an architect to start designing and doing the pre-design of this building. So the purpose and intent, if you're familiar with the Mile High Greyhound Park plan, similar to most plans throughout the state that deal with urban renewal, really the goal or the purpose of the Urban Renewal Authority is to reduce, eliminate, and prevent the spread of blight within an area and to stimulate growth and investment within the area boundaries. The institutional anchor is a component of Mile High Greyhound Park that dates back to 2011 when the Urban Renewal Authority was contemplating purchasing the property. It was refined throughout 2012 as part of the University of Denver's proposal for a real estate contest where they won first place. Further refined through 2013 and 2014 in the feasibility studies and marketing analysis of the project, and then continued to be refined all the way up until 2023. And tonight, we're seeking formal direction from the board so that we can move forward with an RFP, and some of those items that we need to get consensus on is what we want to call the building for the purpose of the RFP, how big of a building we want to market for the RFP, a couple different options for financing, and then generally, what is board's direction on how we should be thinking about the ownership, operations, and management of the building after it's constructed. And we'll talk about those on the following slides. So where we're at right now is we have sufficient TIF revenues coming in that we can select an architect, and really we are committed to working with our retail partner. One thing I want to talk about is throughout the process of selecting a retail partner, it was very important for them to understand the scope and schedule of an institutional building because it's been deemed as the anchor of the project since 2011. And the retailers really look at it as an opportunity to drive customers that otherwise wouldn't be in the area or wouldn't otherwise be at Mile High Greyhound Park. So it's very important to the retailers that we have some direction or understanding of how to move forward with the institutional anchor that we intend to finance. Once we select a pre-design consultant or an architect to start on the pre-design, they're really just looking at the location and floor plate or the area of the building. They're going to be looking at the different uses that the URA board advises on what are the priorities and then what are maybe secondary uses to start to floor plan through that process. To make recommendations on the feasibility, they might tell us in 9 months, guys, you're crazy. This is not something that's going to work. Or they might come back and say, the market would really support these concepts. Let's move forward into design. And then last is to develop a preliminary schedule and a refined budget further than what staff has been able to produce for the purpose of this presentation. So this is a slide we've shared several times in different iterations over the past several months as we've talked about how tax increment financing works and what sort of revenues we expect at Mile High Greyhound Park. If you look at the screen that says the forecast of project TIF, We are in 2023, so we collected right at $100,000 this year, which is significantly more than any other year, and that's the way that tax increment finance works. As development occurs, as reinvestment occurs, as new structures are built, or there's land acquisitions from the public to the private sector, all of those things equal revenue, which then come back to the URA for additional investment. So in 2023, we have very few income-producing properties on site, so we were able to generate $100,000 this year. But as the hotel comes online, as C3 is developed over the next 18 months to deliver 68 more housing units, as the developer moves on to additional residential properties, as the retail gets going, you'll see that we're forecasting right around $2 million a year at full valuation, which we expect to happen around 2028 or 29. As far as debt obligations on the other side of your screen, the top four are actual agreements or contracts or obligations that we currently have that we will have to use TIF to pay off. The other two are ones that are anticipated or estimated. If you'll remember, late last year, staff presented a request, an informal request from Del West to help them bridge the financing gap for D1, which is the market rate apartment complex. Their ask, which was informal, and there's been no formal request or application made, was for about $4 million. And then the retail developer has informed staff and the URA since early in the project that a lot of the retail that staff has directed them to pursue for anchor tenants, sit-down full-service restaurants and the like, that there's a gap between what the costs on the side are versus what the tenant is able to pay. So they're expecting to be a request at some point for a portion of sales tax to go back to that developer. So long story short, we're anticipating just over $40 million in revenues. We have about $17 to $18 million in obligations. Leaves us about $22 million left to figure out, that's really our finance for this institutional anchor building. When you look at what construction costs have done since we entered into agreements that contemplated partnerships for this building, they've increased almost 41%. So, in 2018, a dollar's worth a dollar, that same dollar's worth about 70 cents today. And, there's this opportunity to talk about what size of a building we could reasonably expect to finance and construct out there with or without partnerships. Generally speaking, the direction that we'll be looking for later tonight is, do we want to focus on a building that we can afford without depending on leases or revenues or tenants or other funding mechanisms? Or do we want to focus on the $22 million in TIF we have and build basically to that budget? What you'll see here, staff has created three basically estimates for constructing the buildings. The first would be a building that's centered around the performing arts. That building's about 20 to 25,000 square feet. That's reasonably within budget. If we wanted to open that up and select or attempt to select maybe university partners or technical schools or a community college, that's roughly about the 40,000 square foot building that would have the performing arts component in addition to training components. There would need to be a lease or some sort of cost share to develop and to deliver that building. And then the Performing Arts or Innovation Campus that was presented by Adams 14 at the last URA meeting, we anticipate that that building's about $41 million to construct, so there'd be a significant ask from the tenants or partners to help fund and finance a building like that. What these numbers do not include, or the revenues do not include, because it's such an open item right now, is what is the desirability to have leases or rentals or concessions or sponsorships in that building. Those would be revenues as well that could be reasonable after we've gone through the pre-design and we understand what the building could support. So the direction that we're looking for tonight that would enable staff to move forward and publish an RFP to bring back to the board at a later date to select a consultant to work with the URA on the pre-design and design of this building is generally, for the purpose of the RFP, I know there's been a lot of debate about, is it an institutional anchor, what the name of the building should be. Really, the naming rights will be during construction or very near to after construction of the building, the permanent naming rights. Right now, and since 2011, we've called it institutional anchor. Is that how we want to go to market for the RFP to find a design consultant, or do we want to change the name for that purpose? As I indicated earlier, there's a discrepancy in the size of the building. The larger the building gets, the more expensive the building gets, the more we'd have to ask from potential partners in that building to contribute financially. So really, do we want to build within budget, or do we want to seek funding from our additional partners? And then lastly, there's been several conversations about this concept of providing a building and or giving a building to our partners at no cost. That's really not financially feasible for this project. So what we're asking tonight is it the board's anticipation that the URA will own it, operate it, program, and manage it? Is it the board's opinion that we should be working with the city on potentially an intergovernmental agreement where the URA will design and finance and construct the building, but that the city will operate it or staff it or control the calendar of it? Or is it the URA's desire for us to go and seek a third party like some revenue-generating theaters do, in which we would have a third party come in and manage the entire building? At this time, I'm happy to go through these questions with you, or if you have any questions for staff, we're happy to entertain those. And as I said earlier, although it was not included in your packet, Adams 14 has brought a presentation tonight if you'd like to hear that. And then, like I said earlier, Ascend Performing Arts is also here if you'd like to talk to them about their current operations or their future aspirations if the board selects them as a partner to move forward in this project.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate that presentation. Does anybody on the URA board have any questions or comments for staff at this time? Commissioner Douglas?
Yes, I would like to see the presentation from Adams 14. I do have a question at this point. Wasn't Ascend brought to us by Adams 14?
It's my understanding from emails from dating back about 2 years ago that it was the other way around, that maybe the city had put them in touch, Ascend and Adams 14.
I would like to see those emails. Okay, I'd like to see what everybody is bringing forward, and then I would like to bring some things forward, particularly from a presentation that was made at a meeting back in April of this year. So with that said, would the people from Adams 14 be willing to make their presentation?
Mr. Rogers, it's been asked that we show the emails that show who introduced who. Do you have that email available?
I am searching for that email. I can read that out loud for the public record. Just give me one moment, sir.
And maybe Adams 14 has communications that they could present as well, showing their communications with Ascend.
I have found that email. If you would like for me to read that, sir, I'm more than willing.
Yeah, reading is one thing, seeing is another.
Give me one moment. We'll have the city clerk see if he can print that out on my behalf.
I think the audience at home would probably like to see it as well.
Bill, I'll send it to you.
The other thing that I would like to mention is that during our last URA meeting, you brought forward a decision that was made by the URA board regarding this whole situation. And I just wanted to say that that decision was made prior to Del West becoming a part of this conversation. So I wanted to make that clear to everyone in the public that although that was read as a decision that was made by the URA board, it was also something that was made before Del West became a part of the equation.
So, Chair, what you find on the screen is an email correspondence of myself to Dr. Loria at Adams 14 on December 2nd, virtually introducing Ascend Performing Arts to begin exploring opportunities to partner at the Mile High Greyhound Park as a component of that building. And given that Adams 14 was an important stakeholder within our community in this project. Thought it was prudent to begin that engagement.
Thank you for finding that and bringing that forward and presenting it to everyone, as well as the public.
Sorry, ma'am, could you repeat that so everybody can hear it?
Certainly, I just said thank you for finding that and presenting it to everyone and making it available to members of the public. So was that more clear?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you have any other questions or comments?
No, but I would still like to see the presentation from Adams 14, unless I'm the only one.
I have a request by Commissioner Douglas to see the presentation by Adams 14. Do other commissioners wish to see it as well? Commissioner Noble?
Yes, I'd like to.
Commissioner Chacon?
I would like to as well.
Vice Chair?
Me as well.
Commissioner Kim?
Same.
All right, let's see it.
Thank you. Oh, at the top. Mr. Chair, Caitlin Quander, Special Counsel to the Authority. In order to modify the agenda to include a presentation from Adams 14, if we could take that up as a motion and vote, that would be appreciated.
And is this because it's not on the agenda, because nobody has seen the presentation? What's the reasoning behind that?
Correct, both of those, Mr. Chair.
Both. It's not on the agenda and nobody in city staff or the URA has had an opportunity to view the presentation?
Correct.
Great. Is there a motion to modify the agenda for the URA to have this presentation included? Commissioner Douglas?
So moved, please.
Vice Chair?
Second.
I have a motion second to modify the agenda to include the presentation made by Adams 14. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Douglas?
I'm sorry I didn't cancel my request originally.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, do a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Do you know if Dr. Lydia is online? If Dr. Lydia is here online? I know they sent her a link. Just Mario, okay. Am I ready to go? All right. Good evening, everybody, members of the council. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name is Sheila Burke, and I am serving in place of Dr. Lydia, our Superintendent of Schools for Adams 14. I'm honored to serve as the Chief Academic Officer for our school district, and in place of Dr. Lydia, I'm going to be here tonight to be able to provide you with just an update around our presentation around the Innovation Center at the Mile High Greyhound Park. We had prepared folders for you because at our last meeting that we had with the committee members, it was asked to be able to have us come in with some maps and what the space could potentially look like and the amount of square footage, and so we have that included with you. I have placed the folders here with our team, should you at your leisure want to be able to look forward to those. So again, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to be able to share tonight.
Here, Huseman, would you like me to distribute those?
Please.
Thank you.
Chair, we have Commissioner Tedesco with a hand up.
Oh, yes, Mr. Tedesco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question about this presentation. I was under the understanding when we voted on this that it was to clarify the position that the school board had about the building. not to present a new presentation that nobody has seen. I believe that if we are going to take that into consideration, that should be done after our vote as far as what we decide to do going forward with this. The vote that I gave on your unanimous vote was to clarify, just as we did with the email, as to whether or not there was promises made. I don't believe that this presentation meets that criteria of the vote that I took.
Thank you for that. I do believe that the motion that was made was to modify the agenda to allow for the presentation.
I believe that was the shortened version of what it was for, but the previous conversation was about verifying the emails back and forth as per the question that was asked by one of the commissioners. This was an ongoing aspect of that. I misunderstood or misheard the vote as to whether or not this presentation should be made. This presentation is untimely and out of order for this portion of what we're considering on this aspect of the agreement.
Thanks, sir. I do appreciate you bringing that to our attention. I will defer to our legal counsel on statements made by Commissioner Tedesco.
Mr. Chair, Caitlin Quander, it's certainly up to the chair and the board if you would like to take up a clarifying motion on what you amended the agenda to see as far as a presentation. If there's direction from, or a motion to do so.
Commissioner Tedesco.
If I might add, I'd like to have a legal clarification of whether or not we are considering a partnership offer out of timeliness and not allowing others to bid or give their perception of what this space could be in a fair manner going forward.
Mr. Chair, Caitlin Quander, and I'll let legal counsel Sarah Geiger join as well if she has any further comments. And it's probably helpful to put the slide up that Bill Aiken finished his presentation on a bit. Those are really the questions that are the purpose of this board meeting tonight. It is not to make a decision about particular partners. It's really, do you want any partners based on the financing of the project, or do you want to pursue a project solely on the financing alone? And the opportunity to have one or more partners could continue to remain. And those conversations could continue on. I think these are really the barring kind of gating questions as the staff goes out and speaks with consultants, is understanding the size based on the current structure and financing of the URA. If you live within your means, basically, right, the increment that is estimated to come in, it could fund a 25,000 square foot center. If you want to do something more, you would be looking at one or more other partners and need to be looking to those partners in some sort of financial contribution as well. So these are really the questions before you. Which partners you choose is really a kind of a future discussion for this board. And Commissioner Tedesco is right. We certainly want to go through a very fair, open process for this board in doing so. Adams 14 would, of course, be one of those parties, along with Ascend and any other parties that wanted to come forward and talk with the board about that partnership. But you are not deciding tonight on a partnership, at least before the questions put before you by staff related to Adams 14 specifically.
Mr. Tedesco?
I think that clarifies for me the position that I took. And so I would like to either request a clarifying motion going forward or to rescind the motion because of the fact that I don't believe, and after getting legal counsel, that we are at the point of looking at presentations. If there is something that clarifies the comments that are being made in the suggestions that are being made about what the promises were on this building, I would be more than happy to look at those and consider those going forward. The questions that are before us and that have been posted on the agenda and that have been properly vetted for this meeting are those that are before us today. I don't believe this falls into that. I think this falls into a future conversation, depending on what we decide on the questions that are before us today. I'm not trying to speak against the school district. I just believe that in proper form, we should follow this for everybody's sake so that we are not falling out of the norm on ad hoc positions.
Thanks, sir. I do appreciate that again. And you did vote, and we're on the, for lack of better words, winning side of the vote there. So if you wish to make a motion to reconsider, then that motion could be heard.
I would like to make a motion to reconsider the last motion based on the facts presented to us.
So I have a motion to reconsider the vote or motion to amend the agenda, allowing for this presentation. Is there a second? Commissioner Hurst?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to reconsider the motion to allow this presentation. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Amador?
Sorry about that. So I believe at the last meeting that we had, the district was invited to come and present tonight. I believe you were not here for that one, but they did get invited to come and present on the 28th. That was what was talked to by Mr. Akins and I believe our district at that time when we were coming to present and asked us to join us tonight.
Commissioner Tedesco?
If that is truly the case, because, I could be missing something here, then I have an objection from the very beginning because nobody, as was stated earlier, no one, including staff, has seen the material that is being presented tonight. And I believe that if we are going to present something, that material is required to be presented before this meeting so that it can be put on the agenda. And I don't believe that that was done. Now, again, I may be missing something and there may be a part that I'm not catching on to. But as far as the procedure that I have witnessed in the past, that is the requirement, that if you are invited to come speak, you present your materials and those materials are added to the agenda and we have that on the agenda. That is not what I saw tonight, henceforth my objection to the vote that we took on the unclarity of the motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second to reconsider the motion amending the agenda. Is there any other discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
That would be, from what I heard, Mayor, our chair, failed 2 in favor, 10 opposed,
Three in favor.
3 in favor, 9 opposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time tonight and for the opportunity to present. Tonight, what you have in front of you is the possibilities around what the Innovation Center at the Mile High Greyhound Park could look like, with us partnering together, both in an opportunity for us to be able to meet the collective needs of the stakeholders and community members that we collectively serve. So on here, we're looking at what a new space could potentially look like through the conversations that we've had with senior staff from the City of Commerce City and partners that we have within our Adams 14 district and others that may be joint partnerships between us as a district and the city. So when we were faced with the looking at this several years ago when we were with previous partnerships and now within our current partners with the City of Commerce City, we started to look and study other cities that have innovation centers, specifically St. Vrain, newly set up with Cherry Creek School District, where they have innovation centers that they just implemented this past school year. So we started to look at what are things that they've done with their city as we started to look at what are the designs and the academic needs of the students that we serve collectively on our end of the district. So in here, you're going to see within the presentation, which is much of what you've already seen at our last meeting. The part that we've added in here tonight, which was at the request of the last meeting, was what does this space look like and how are we looking to potentially set up that meets the needs of what this committee has shared and the needs of our stakeholders collectively. So in that, this space is really set up to be able to showcase our collective opportunities with our community members, both from an academic setting and from those to be able to help with the performing arts, because we recognize the need within our stakeholders to be able to share that and that it's a passion of the community that we collectively serve. So in that, we wanted to be able to have a space that allows for us to grow into, that again meets the needs of us collectively as a district and you all as a city, and then connect it to some of the work that we're already doing through work-based learning opportunities. This allows us to be able to grow into the academies that we have already implemented within our district. Things such as our culinary arts program, our health and human services program, and specifically we'd like to consider this space to be able to use for our digital information and technology academy by offering in here an opportunity for a communication hub that would service both the city of Commerce City and the stakeholders that we have in an academic setting, allowing us to be able to broadcast news stations and broadcast information out to our stakeholders and having our students be able to learn alongside that. While they're also learning and earning industry certificates and setting up for potential careers that they may want to study in the future and lead to college degrees. We recognize that Adams 14 has a pride instituted in that, as well as the City of Commerce City, and so to be able to support that, we wanted to honor the rich history that our community has. And you'd heard that from Dr. Lydia, our superintendent of schools, at the last meeting, to be able to offer showcases within this space that helps to bring those that will be visiting and utilizing this space and having them engage in our rich history. That can be done through display cases, through partnerships with the museum that we have here locally, so that students and family members can come through and see that part of it, so that it's shared between both of us. Often we've heard about the performing arts space, and we have been working with Ascend to be able to help with that. They too are here tonight, but we want to be able to showcase that because we recognize that our community wants to be able to hold on to the performing arts that is near and dear to their heart. That would be done through music, through theatrical plays, performances, poetry, dance, and then art. And having space dedicated to that, as you'd heard in the previous presentations, that allows it to be set up in the space for them to be able to come in and do some performing arts, not just for students, but also for community members as well. Part of the space is set up for us to be able to have what we call as maker spaces. When we started to look at some of the innovation centers, specifically in St. Vrain, they have these multifunctional spaces that allows for collaboration, both with stakeholders at any age level to come together. This is where we would serve both not only our students, but also the public and industry leaders. Part of our academy's work that we have at both of our high schools here in Adams 14 allows for us to be able to have our students engage with our industry partners with projects that the students are working towards, allowing them to be able to have guest speakers coming in and for them to be able to ask questions and receive feedback on their projects. One of those examples might be something along the lines of financial planning. So if we have students engaging in a project around financial planning, then we might bring experts to come in and they would interview families to be able to see what does their planning look like, how are they saving for college, how are they saving for retirement, why the students are designed to be able to put together a financial plan for the families in there, something that's relevant to them and allows the students to be able to apply across multidisciplinary contents, how to be able to solve for some of the problems that our families are facing around this particular example. A space such as this would allow our students to be able to engage with guest speakers, for them to receive feedback on their projects, to be able to present their projects to a space which helps with those 21st century skills, such as the one I'm doing tonight around public speaking, that we want our students to be able to engage with in a performing center or through a collaboration space such as this. This also allows for us to be able to partner with other venues. We've talked oftentimes, you'd heard Dr. Lydia mention in the last couple of presentations around our partnership with Footsteps to Brilliance. Having a collaboration space in here would allow for us to be able to do that, and allows us to be able to partner with higher education agencies, both to serve our current pre-K through 12th grade students, but also for families who are looking to be able to re-enter back into college or continue through concurrent enrollment opportunities. This also leads to certifications, career opportunities, and then we've also talked about our partnership with some of the space foundations that we have, specifically the Aldrin Foundation, to be able to help with science and space, which is one of the areas within our surveys that we've completed with our community members that they say they're most interested in. And again, it helps with our healthcare providers. This part leads to all of the academies that we have at both of our high schools, and the collaboration space would allow us to be able to come together to do that both during the school day and after hours and into the weekend. On the slide behind you and in your packet, you'll just see a couple of the partners that we have. We've mentioned these, as you've heard Dr. Lydia in previous presentations, also share some of those. The intention behind this space is really for us to be able to come together and to collectively serve our community, both now and for future residents. So it's an attractive space in there. And again, we've studied other communities that have brought in things such as this, like Longmont, where St. Vrain has brought in their innovation center. We've looked at Cherry Creek, which is now just up and creating theirs, to be able to say, how can we partner together to be able to build a space such as this and really see the vision for the stakeholders that we collectively serve. And so we're asking for the opportunity to be able to do that together. Some of the elements, which is what we were asked for at the last meeting, to come together to say, what might this space look like? So in here we have the Performing Arts Theater, we have the Black Box Theater that helps to meet the needs that we've heard often from this committee. It helps for any of the dance studios, the bistro, as well as a catering kitchen, all on the first floor, and some conference space that can be selected. On the second level, we're envisioning something along the lines of flexible learning spaces or maker spaces, which is often true in any innovation center. Some outdoor flex and patio spaces for us to be able to work with partners such as the Aldrin Foundation to be able to take our families and students to explore space, to look at that and teach concepts around core content areas through space. We have flexible learning opportunities in there, again, things that can be shared for students of all ages, both from birth to 12th graders, and for our families to be able to come in and utilize that space, again, at any age. And then we also have space dedicated for wraparound services. Those include things around family planning, resources that we connect families to around healthcare, medical benefits, things that our community collectively needs that we can dedicate a space to, that they can come in and either have classes or receive information on. So again, this is new, and it was at the request of the previous meetings to say, how are we envisioning this space to look and feel? So again, this is some of the pieces that we want to be able to say, here's how we can collectively come together to be able to partner around what the space for an innovation center at the Mile High Greyhound Park can look, sound, and feel like as we collectively serve our community together. Here's some images around what that could look like. Again, these are inside of your packet. So we have the performing arts space. We recognize again that that's a key factor for our community. We have a black box theater, again, that allows us to be able to be flexible in the type of performance we have. This benefits our academy students and students of all ages to be able to come and share their presentations and learn from one another. We have rehearsal spaces for band, for science, and dance studios, because again, we recognize the importance to our community. Conference space is available. We recognize that you all shared that you wanted to be able to have some revenue around this. This would allow for people to be able to rent out the space for whatever conference areas that they desire. The bistro setup, again, this was part of the original proposals. Catering spaces, and you saw that on the map around what that space could look like. Flexible learning spaces, again, for students of all ages, from birth really to adults. And then lastly, community spaces, again, where we can go out, study the stars, study things of space, or study things that are of interest to our families. The design behind this is really to be able to have things that meet our needs both now and years from now with a space such as this. Again, studying from other districts locally that have done this already. Our services want to be able to be wraparound to meet the needs of our families and our ever-changing communities. And then having a welcoming space in there, again, that would host the museum and the artifacts that help us make Commerce City what it is today and protect the rich history that we have. And essentially setting that up across the space so that our guests can see where we've traveled and how we've arrived and what's in the future for us as a community. So again, we just want to thank you for your time tonight and for sharing the possibilities around what this space could be for us as a collective partnership for us now and in the future.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that presentation. Mr. Aiken,
Yes, sir.
want to continue with your questions, please?
So while he's setting it back up, obviously there's 3 questions before you, and depending on how the board would like to go through each one, the first question is with respect to, at least for RFP purposes, do we want to call it an institutional anchor or something else? For question 2, the question is whether or not to support a 25,000 or a 40,000 square foot facility. Please understand, based on the financials that were shared in the presentation, we do not have the financial feasibility or wherewithal without certain potential rental rates or revenue generation to support the construction of a 60,000 square foot building. And then 3, the operation, the programming, and the management of that facility, as you see laid out between A through C.
Commissioner Noble?
Thanks. I did want a little clarification on something. Going back to the presentation from Adams 14, do you count the square footage on the main floor or the entire square footage when you're calculating how big a building they were talking about?
It'd be the entire.
Okay,
the
so
entire
I have
floor.
54,900. What do you have for that? Did
For the
you
one
add it
they-
up?
The one they just passed out?
Uh-huh.
I did some back of the napkin math on it just in my head, and it appeared when you add in the mechanical rooms and the restrooms that aren't properly labeled on the plans that it exceeds 60.
Okay, and I'm just going by the call-outs for each of the rooms, and I got 54,900. I just wanted to have some perspective on this. Institutional anchor makes it sound like it's only one thing. So if there's a multiple purpose, then that limits thinking on the part of anyone receiving the RFP or addressing it. So institutional anchors in parentheses or something? That would be what I would like to see. Let's see, so can you ask for two different responses on the RFP? One for 25,000 and one for 40,000?
We certainly could. And the purpose of the RFP is to select the architect. So as Mr. Rogers and Ms. Quander said earlier, once we have an architect online is when we'll really get into the design elements. But for the purpose of the RFP, there could be a scale. There could be a scale that the architect bids for a smaller building or a larger building.
Okay, so they're not giving us a drawing or anything. They're simply saying, we could do this. And because I would like to at least include the range, even if it's outside of the URA budget, if you will, that if there is a way for people to participate in the financing of it, then we should account for that if we're doing an RFP at this point. And certainly, I don't think the city's in the business of operating and managing buildings, but a third party would be the best plan, in my opinion.
Commissioner Hurst.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'd like to call out is I think we're limiting ourselves at this point. I pulled up the St. Vrain. I had not heard about that, but I think this is a really good website that goes into their history and their story. One of the key things they identify there is a $16.6 million grant opportunity called the Race to the Top grant to help implement STEM integration. And I think with something like that, that's how a true partnership could be developed, but then we don't have to talk about 25,000, 40,000. We can talk about building what we need, but getting the appropriate grant to implement some of these things.
Commissioner Tedesco.
I don't have a button. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would propose, and let me know if I'm out of line here, to make a motion that we put the RFP out with the parameters of looking at both the 25,000 and the 40,000 options, with options of what we could do if we partnered for financing in this building. I think that it answers it answers all three questions. We could ask that RFP to consider names, which would be appropriate and could be applied and voted on at a later date that we may not be able to think of today, that could be very useful in the future. We could have that RFP applied to that first question. And then as far as ownership, we could have the RFP look at which is the most beneficial to our constituency as it's presented. We may find out some other things that we need to know when considering this. And I think that that RFP would be very useful in answering all three questions. So I'd like to make a motion that, if it's appropriate, Mr. Chair, that we consider a motion for an RFP to consider the 25,000 to 40,000 and any options of partnering, whether that may increase the square footage and what that means to the city, as well as the question number 3 of what each of those 3 items could possibly be. And then also number 1, which is, should the name stay an institutional anchor, or are there other recommended possibilities that could benefit the entirety of the project altogether?
All right, you'll have to excuse me, but that was a whole lot of words and I can't write that
I hope you're
fast.
recording.
So can you give me a paraphrased motion that hits all the points that you need without all the color commentary?
I would say I make a motion to consider an RFP that would include all three questions to be expanded around if we partnered, how much square footage we could get to answer question number 2.
All right, let's try this. I have a motion to prepare an RFP that includes all three questions, and that if we partner, then it can be expanded to include additional square footage.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is there a second? Commissioner Noble?
I'm not a second. I'm a question regarding clarification. I don't understand the portion of if we partner, if we have a financial partner, what is meant by if we partner?
If I may. So partnership would be any and all of the above. We would ask the RFP to address whether or not that's a partnership with Adams 14, whether that's a partnership with Oakwood, whether that's a partnership with whoever it may be that's out there that's willing to partner, and what that may look like. They have a better scope of who those possible partners could be, and I think that in that RFP, we're asking them to vet that.
This is for the architect.
This is so the RFP is for the design consultant, what size and intended use of the building. So not for building the actual building, but for the design of the building and what it could possibly be used and the partnerships that could be implemented in that.
All right, I have a motion to prepare an RFP for the design consultant that'll include all three questions, and if we are partnering with an outside organization to expand upon this space. Commissioner Hurst?
Yeah, I'll second, but if I can take 2 seconds to expand on why. I think what if I understand Board Member Tedesco right, is that we need to understand the parameters that we can get into, or if we're gonna jump in and build a building, if we only have $22 million that we can finance off of, then it only can be so big. But if there's opportunity to create partnerships where we have more access to, kind of funding that allows us to finance more, that then would allow for a larger building and maybe more uses. And so I think it's understanding what we have in front of us and what's the possible outcomes is important because you can only finance kind of what you can pay back. And so to build this building, we need to understand that first.
All right, I have a motion and a second to prepare an RFP for the design consultant that includes all three questions, and that if we partner with an outside organization can be expanded upon size and scope. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Noble.
I'd just like to ask if this is too broad for an RFP or if this is within the realm of a typical RFP.
So staff has consulted with multiple architects around the Denver market area that have expressed interest in partnering on the design side of this, and all those statements are in line with what they would expect for the stage that we're at, which is, hey, tell us what we can and or should build, or what are our options to build for the types of intended uses that we're talking about during these meetings. Then we'll take that, which is the pre-design phase, to bring back to the URA board to get feedback before we go into the schematic phase, and then before we go into the construction drawing phase.
Just to add to this, I think it's worth some clarification to Commissioner Tedesco's motion. There is this question about feasibility, financial feasibility of 25 versus 40 versus 60,000, depending upon the partnerships. An architect will be able to take the spatial assessment, analysis, and or exercise. However, there is a accompanying piece of that from a fiscal impact analysis to determine what leverage or what sources would need to help offset any additional costs. So whether or not you go back to the 60,000 square feet and we have that gap, what does that look like from either rental rates, either ticket sales and what type of potential partner that then may attract, that would then help set forward an additional RFP on securing that third-party partnership. So I would just simply want to make sure that there's that clarity out there, as well as that, yes, you'll get the spatial design of that space based on the 3 questions, but you're not going to get the financial feasibility analysis as to what is missing, what should be the formula in being able to capture that gap, and how to proceed with that. Or if not wanting to, we at least then know it may just be X and Y as a partner as to X, Y, and Z. But that's missing from your motion. I would say you would want to have that to be able to have, or to be able to make an informed decision if that's what you're truly looking for.
That's my
Commissioner Douglas.
hesitation.
Commissioner Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor Huesman. I have a question, if I can pose to Commissioner Hurst about the St. Vrain. Do you know more about that grant? Was that grant applied for prior to the project being set into motion, or how was that?
I'm only going based off what this website says for their story, but it does seem that they built their innovation campus and we're looking to expand on it due to some things that they weren't able to deliver on during the building of that campus, and they applied for this grant to help build the innovation center.
Mm-hmm.
I've only read through it once. I don't want to be like, completely retelling their story, but I think that's what it's describing here. And there was 16.6 million from the Race to the Top, I think is what it was called, grant. So I don't know if that's still an available grant or anything like that, but that's kind of something that I would, with this type of building or this type of approach, you would think that there is opportunities out there for us to collectively apply for a grant to try to implement some of these programs. And the grant would be more for the building and not for the day-to-day operation of the program.
Thank you for allowing me to ask that question of Commissioner Hurst. I feel like we're not in a race to the top right here. We're just in a race. And I think we need to do a lot more digging. We need to have a lot more questions answered. I do not think that we need to put our school district in a position of not knowing where they stand and what their obligations or what's expected of them. I cannot support this motion. And like I said, I feel like we're in a race to make a decision immediately. This has been put on hold for a very, very long time. It has snowballed from being a promise made by the developer to deliver a CTE building to the school district into this. And I think if we're not careful, we're going to get ourselves into deep issues here. And so I think we need to have a lot more meetings about this. I know a lot of people are anxious and getting impatient, but at the same time, these are some big decisions that are going to impact our community and the people who live here. And so with that, I think we're just getting way ahead of ourselves here. So I can support this tonight.
Commissioner Kim.
Thank you. Just point of clarification here regarding the motion with 3 questions. I just want to confirm that also in question number 2, that's including the 60,000 square foot option. Because as it stands right now, it is just the 3 questions without the 60,000 square foot option. Just want to make sure that's cleared.
Commissioner Tedesco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to clarify that I did include in when I was stating the 60,000 option. And I believe Jason had an amendment, or at least had said that there should be an amendment to include some language to clarify.
Mr. Rogers. That's you.
Thank you, sir. My esteemed legal counsel was whispering in my ear trying to talk us through the motion, but I did want to take a moment to respond to Commissioner Douglas with respect to that we are in a race. What I would like to clarify is that, as Mr. Aiken had shared during his presentation, the discussion of this facility is interwoven, interlinked with our ability to deliver commercial. We have heard that the commercial community that is exploring their ability to deliver certain amenities, certain services that we have heard that we as the URA and that the city has requested that we be aggressive in going out and getting. It is that 40,000 approximately square feet of commercial that will help fund this facility. If this facility is not a part of the equation within the timeframes that we have taken to outline the sale of the property, to be able to begin the vertical construction, because they're looking for that daytime but also nighttime population to support their facilities, they will not come to the site, just to be plain spoken. That's important. So we are trying to work in tandem with being able to continue to improve upon the amenities within that community. Now, the other question that you had raised about that this seems rather sudden as it relates to a conversation. The city engaged Adams 14 dating back to February of 2022 on the matter. So almost the better part of coming up on 2 years in this coming February on being able to get to a position about partnership, a position about terms and condition, and being able to determine what a program within the facility could be. So the timing in which where we're starting to see the market and we're starting to see this in our respect is one that we're willing to work through and willing to engage and willing to partner with Adams 14, but we are working through timelines in which we're trying to optimize for the overall community, for the commercial opportunity, but also being able to identify when that amenity can actually be delivered. So I just wanted to provide that point of clarification.
Well, with that said, I'm going to refer back to the presentation that was given on April 10th, 2023. The vision for the remaining land is to create a unique, high-quality, mixed-use environment in Commerce City. The west side of MHGP will create an activity node by serving not only the surrounding neighborhoods, but also creating a higher density, mixed-use new regional center and community destination for Commerce City. The district will include a distinct combination of employment, education, retail, civic amenities, and open space. The mixed-use institutional building is envisioned to host a variety of civic and cultural users, from a culinary educational school to a historical museum to service organizations such as the Chamber of Commerce. The listed items were culinary arts program space, small restaurant spaces for students to operate, 3,000 square foot bistro kitchen on a lower level area to include storage equipment and instruction space, flexible meeting spaces on upper level, 3 to 4 800+ square foot classroom spaces adjacent to the kitchen space. So obviously this was aimed at advancing culinary skills for students, provide an adequate space outdoors for food trucks and other culinary-centric events, 12,000 to 14,000 square feet for Historical Society and Chamber of Commerce, potential innovation center component, facility needs to be flexible for future uses that support this building type, building to be active morning, noon, and night. Like I said, this just keeps snowballing. And now you're saying that to bring in commercial, why should we put that burden? We need this to bring in commercial. Why should we put that burden, though, on our school district to make that happen? And you're talking about leasing it to the school district. Like I said, this started out as the developer making a promise to good faith, obviously, because it doesn't seem to be in writing anywhere, for a CTE building. So that at that point in time, the kids were supposed to learn carpentry. But now things, I don't know how many years later, the needs have changed. And so, yes, there's probably still a need for carpentry, of course, but their interests are more in learning technical skills and getting a college degree. Bringing in higher education to this community is going to be an absolute benefit, and that can bring in the commercial. I just think that by making a decision this evening, we're going to put not only ourselves, but other entities in a precarious position. We were also offered a presentation by the performing arts entity tonight. We made a motion to see the Adams 14 presentation, and we saw that. But do we have to make another motion to see the performing arts presentation? It was offered as part of the introduction. So, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. I'm just trying to make sure that we know what we're doing, the direction that we're headed in. Right now, I have no idea what that is.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll allow for our legal counsel to address the question at the end, but I want to just put a point of clarification. You did mention that the April 10th meeting from this year. Within that presentation, that's simply recounting the discussion that occurred as part of the urban planning study that HOK had provided, which took into account those different various uses within the institutional acre, whether it's historic society or so forth. There was discussion and direction even before that for us to go back to the school district and to not necessarily look at partnerships from what was within the urban study, but a more simplistic format with Adams 14 and a potential partner that they may seek through a graduate program or an advanced degree. When we engaged with the Adams 14 in February, we provided terms and conditions with respect to that facility based on that direction, which removed the various partnerships that you found within the slide. However, the visioning study was just that, being able to devise a concept for what could be the maximum building square footage that the site would be able to support from a spatial perspective for the institutional anchor, but no commitment to those actual users being within the space until we had submitted those terms and conditions based on a simplistic partnership and discussion with Adams 14 back in February of 2022. But Caitlin?
Mr. Chair, Caitlin Quander. I would just add one thing to what Jason shared. I think I've seen staff's conversations really in order to kind of advance the ball and give this board more to reflect on and respond to is really what I'm hearing the purpose around the RFP being, to really, if it's those questions or more specific to the two options, not to foreclose various partnership opportunities, but to really do some more planning and visioning taking into account the financial budget that really wasn't part of that factor last time, so that this board can have some more concrete examples to then discuss and do your decision-making together. So I know that that was kind of the impetus behind the questions prompted by staff. To the question on the 2018 agreements and the obligations of the developer, Del West is the developer of the residential portion, not the commercial, but of the residential portion. Their obligation was to pay $330,000 to Adams 14 School District. And then that money was intended to be spent to build 2 modular units. We understand from Adams 14 that those funds were instead used as part of their general budget, I believe on some bathroom improvements, certainly something we can revisit on amending that agreement. I believe in discussions, at least with the developer, they are okay with the fact that the $330,000 they provided was used in a different manner, but it would be our advice to probably revisit that just so that everyone is clear. The second component I would flag is the 2018 intergovernmental agreement. This is between the authority and Adams 14, negotiated and intended. Did 2 things. Again, it was set forth that requirement of the $330,000 to construct the 2 modular units with 2 classrooms at the Central Elementary School site. And then the second item was a requirement to participate in good faith negotiations regarding the potential to include the district as a partner in the ongoing financing, construction, and management of a career technical education services institution. So that is what the legal documents that we have obligated the developer to do, obligated the authority to do, and the Adams 14 School District to do.
Could you repeat the part about the career technical?
Sure. So that section in the agreement itself is titled Cooperation on Potential Career Technical Education Services Site. And it requires that the authority and the district agree to participate in good faith negotiations regarding the potential to include the district as a partner in the ongoing financing, construction, and management of a career technical education services institution.
And I'd like to add just one point of clarification to that as well. In the same agreement, the residential developer committed to doing a fee in lieu of dedications of land. So with each permit that the developer secures from the city collects a fee for that and remits it back to the district. Currently, the city's fee ordinance is for a single-family detached home, it's about $1,600 per home. For a duplex, it's $749 per home. For the townhomes, it's $615 per home, and for apartments, it's about $400 per unit. So to put that in context, the empowerment project that just opened, that was about a $20,000 contribution financially at time of permit. And the C3 townhomes that were all permitted last month, that was about an additional $45,000 contribution. So the developer is making multiple contributions, one voluntary and one in lieu of.
And do you have that total?
I don't have the total on me right now because those fees are subject to change. My understanding is that they do change when the fee ordinance change, but right now the adopted ordinance that the city holds is it's $1,575 for a single family home, $750 for a duplex, $615 for a townhome, and $396 per unit for an apartment. Those fees are collected by the Community Development Department and then remitted back to the school district as revenue.
So those are fees that are in the future, correct?
With every unit that they've pulled to date for all the hundreds of units that are currently built out there, every time one of those permits was pulled, the developer paid a fee to the city. The city took that fee and gave it to the county. It's called a fee in lieu of. So instead of land dedication, that's what they were required to do by code. The $330,000 that Ms. Quander discussed earlier was what they did.
I understand the
voluntary
330, but I'm curious if you have a figure on that fee in lieu.
Not off the top of my head, but it would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ford.
Thank you. and we're having a lot of discussion on this. And looking at the budget and looking at what the cost estimates are, I believe that the URA needs to live within its means. I will be supportive of the motion because I'm interested to see what the RFP presents to us as opportunities for financing and opportunities for partnerships. But depending on what the RFP results are, I still think the URA needs to live within its means. So I'm hoping that we can come up with some partnerships and opportunities to expand the building for more services and benefits to our community. But looking at it holistically, we need to live within our means, and I'll support the motion, but without any partners or any additional financing to be able to pay for this facility, I'm going to have to continue to live within the means of the URA.
Commissioner Chacon.
A couple clarifying questions. So according to the last statement that you made, Adams 14 can also help in financing. Would they be able to apply for grants in a way too?
Mr. Chair, Caitlin Quander. Yes, that was what the agreement contemplated, was that the parties would partner and negotiate in good faith around financing, construction, and management of what that would look like.
Have there been any studies or surveys from or with community yet about what communities wanted for the space?
They date back several years. The city and the Urban Renewal Authority did a very robust feasibility study back in 2013 and another market study in 2014, but it has not been updated in almost 10 years.
So there hasn't been any recent studies about what communities?
There haven't, but as part of the RFP that we have, we're contemplating really 5 phases. The first phase, which is the pre-design conceptual phase, does include an update to the feasibility. So that would be presented back to the URA board. If we move forward with the RFP, that would be presented back to the URA board before we move forward into actually designing the construction drawings for the building. So what we're looking for is really to go to market, select an architect to carry us through the entire project, knowing that we're going to release it in multiple phases, and really the only phase that we would release it with after we bring a recommendation back to the board to enter into a contract with that architectural firm would be to go ahead and do the floor planning, try to understand what uses can live under one roof, try to understand how those uses can live under one roof, what the cost would be, and then also to engage the public and to update the feasibility.
And as of right now, Adams 14 can't help us in that process overall, or can't be a part of it?
I would defer to Caitlin for that particular question.
Caitlin Quander, Legal Counsel. I think when you're issuing an RFP, it can be difficult for parties to jointly issue one. I think it probably makes more sense for the authority to issue the RFP. But I mean, I don't want to speak for staff, but I would expect they would be consulting with the school district along with a number of other known potential partners to understand their goals so that the selected consultant can kind of take those into account in what they come back with for the board.
I think that's a good question, Caitlin. I think, quite frankly, it actually becomes a threshold question because we're talking about partnerships, and we're talking about an RFP of going out and solidifying partnerships. So the question I would have is that to identify partners above and beyond Adams 14? Because then if that is the understanding, we can then weave into the process of public engagement, consultant, vendor selection, Adams 14's participation and partnership and discussion in and around that, and obviously leading it through the design and the financial analysis. But what I've heard generally, and I think we need some clarity as staff, is how are we defining partnership? Is that above and beyond the base, which is everybody into the facility, or is the base including Adams 14 in that equation?
I can't support this motion until it has Adams 14 throughout the entire process, because to me, there's a difference between community productivity and community benefits. Honestly, the community benefits is to enrich the quality of life for a community that you can't pull necessarily from just money. This is to acquire knowledge or transformative education, in my opinion, that adding more partnerships, especially partnerships and collaboration has a whole school district competing with them in a way that we should be supporting that school district especially. Right now, I've been talking with workers' rights, EPIC, and the biggest thing that they're talking about, they want to move it to Denver and spaces like Commerce City, is workforce development. A lot of community members around North Denver, Commerce City, GES have all asked for some form of workforce development. This could be an innovation center that could help support that. And I think Adams 14 should be throughout the process and understanding how we can actually have those educational foundations there. Everyone else as another partner is incredibly important, but to support that form of education needs to be ahead of the list as a community benefit, not just a form of community productivity. So thank you.
Commissioner Amador.
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess for me, my biggest clarification or question that I'm going to have is, I mean, I kind of agree with Mr. Ford that I think you have to live within your means of what you can build, right? You had something that was designed. It's not, the funding is not going to be there. We need to live within our means for what we have so that we know, you know, because once you start to get into private equity or your private companies that are going to start investing in this, you know, what is it going to turn out to be, right? If I have a company that comes in and says, I'm going to give you $40 million to build something, they're going to have that whole building, right? I mean, I think we're within a means of, say, we could build a 2,500 square foot for our district or for the community to enrich the community in anything that you can with the 2,500 square foot. So I think you put an RFP that says that, right? You can put out two of them, like you said, you put out one that says, hey, this is what we have, this is what's in our means. If we want to do 40 or 60,000 square feet, how are you going to help fund that, right? And what is that going to look like partnering with other people? And how is, you know, that going to work together as one? Because what we're saying is, oh, well, you know, we can go and build bigger, but we're going to have to get private people to come out and help us. And they're going to have a say in what's in there. Where if we build what's in its mean, the city has the control, you know, we can build that and work in collaboration like it was, right? You say everything that we have is in good faith. In good faith, we can build a 25,000 square foot building and we can afford it. That's what's in good faith with the community without going out and having to get more stuff. And like you said, this is what's relying on all of our retail space around there. So if you're wanting us to push something through right away, if you're doing a 2,500 square feet or 25,000 square feet, that's what we can afford, then you know what can be built there to go out and get all your other stuff that's around there, and you build it to build the community and enrich it at that 25,000 square feet if that's what you can afford.
Commissioner Noble.
This is for the motion maker, so going back to the motion that we have on the floor. Does your motion include then the language of 2A and 2B, Performing Arts Center in both cases?
So I'd like to clarify that my motion did not include that language, but the language was included in what we had been contemplating from the very beginning. This in no means is to cut anybody out of the option of being involved in this. This is to identify, to help us clarify and move forward as to what is feasibly accessible and acquirable by the funding and what positions we have in through partnerships. If the school district can partner financially to help us build this building, then we want to explore that, and that's what the RFP would do. If there are other entities that want to partner and feel they can partner and utilize some of the space and allow for other uses as well in that space, I believe that the only thing we can do is identify better options for us moving forward. This does not guarantee anybody any of the space, only identifies and clarifies the uses and the funding that could come forward that could allow that. And even if we're going to, as the presentation said, consider possibilities, then some of these partnerships might even include space through a possibility that if they're paid for from outside and utilized in different arenas, could mean that the school district could operate in a space without funding. But we don't know that until we actually do an RFP to see what type of space usage and financial partnerships we can acquire to make that happen, which is the purpose of the motion that I made, is to allow an RFP to go out so that they could work in good faith with all of our partners to see who could partner with this to make a lot of this happen. And the reason I
Commissioner
say that.
Tedesco, can I just want to go back to my question?
Yep.
Do you want the words Performing Arts Center included? Because you said use this whole screen. So do you want Performing Arts Center included, or are you saying it would be, it would not be defined? It would simply be institutional anchor or anchors and then 25,000 square feet?
Do the three questions include that language? I'm not saying it.
Pardon me?
I said, if it's in the language, now I see it after the 40,000 square foot.
Right.
I included everything that was up there.
Okay, so your motion is defining the space as including a performing arts center.
My motion is not defining the space as a performing arts center, but defining what possibilities of space could be used as performing arts center. Because the options up there are 25,000 square feet, 40,000 square feet, and then the presentation we got was in excess of 60,000 square feet. So to make that happen, what does that look like? That's why the RFP and the motion that I made was to see at what level we could support any of that.
Chair, if I may, real quick, I've been hearing a point of this discussion as it relates to RFP about public entity versus private entity. I want to make sure that we are abundantly clear that the intent of the RFP from staff's perspective is never to actually go out and secure a private entity within this facility. It's always contemplated to be a public-public partnership, and or potentially if there is a driven nonprofit that would like to partner with the URA, partner with Adams 14, that is community beneficial, but also complementary to the mission and the vision of both organizations. So it's not as though that we would be renting this out or looking to rent this out market rate to a private office user. So it's really more or less really trying to stay within that public benefit realm of being able to provide services out to the community.
All right, we have a motion saying to move forward with preparing an RFP for a design consultant that includes all three questions and expand upon it if we are partnering with another entity. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no request for other discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Did you catch it? All right, if you're an aye, raise your hand for me, please. And if you're a nay, raise your hand. All right, the motion fails 5-5. Okay. Is there anything else you need to discuss, Mr. Aiken?
Just that approval of releasing us to do the RFP doesn't commit the URA to not have partners, to have partners, to build the building, to not build the building. It's really just the next logical step to provide more information so that we can further the discussion.
Appreciate that. That ship has sailed, though. Did you have anything else you wanted to present?
No, sir.
What's that?
No, sir.
You didn't have anything else you wanted to present? Okay.
One moment, sir. I did, just so that it's clear for the board as it currently stands, and I believe Commissioner Noel actually was about to provide a alternative motion. Without some direction, we cannot move forward in any respect to this facility.
Commissioner Noble?
Thank you. I wanted to make a substitute motion because as I see it, we're simply seeking a design firm to help us through this process now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I don't want anything defined then. We simply want them to give us, we don't need a name. They'll know that it's a city URA building. Number two, we want estimate on 25,000 square feet, 40,000 square feet, and 60,000 square feet. And finally, I don't see how the design firm can help us make ownership, operations, programming, and management decisions. That seems to be a URA decision. Is that true or not?
That is true.
Okay, so my motion is to create an RFP that asks for a design consultant for 25,000 square foot building, 40,000 square foot building, and a 60,000 square foot building for that range.
Commissioner Noble, just a point of clarification. The prior discussion with respect to the RFP also concerned the financing aspect. So
Okay,
to the
yes, all right.
extent we can, and honestly, you know, this may be my confusion. It may be that we need separate motions for separate RFPs with respect to the financing, but I'll defer to the director and Mr. Aiken to potentially clarify that, but just so we include the financing to some extent.
Okay, makes sense. So my motion is to issue an RFP for a design consultant for a 25,000 square foot building with a construction estimate of $20,765,000, 40,000 square foot building with a construction estimate of $29,225,000, and a 60,000 square foot building with an estimate of $40,890,000.
I have a motion to issue an RFP for a design consultant for a 25,000 square foot building estimated to cost $20,765,000, a 40,000 square foot building estimated to cost $29,225,000, or a 60,000 square foot building estimated to cost $40,890,000. Is there a second? Commissioner Douglas.
I'll second that, please.
I have a motion second to issue that RFP for the purposes stated. Is there any discussion? Mr. Tedesco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll pose the question to the motion maker as well. If we could flip to that slide that you had. Your motion, to be clear, does it include the language as specified intended use? And is that the designated language you want used intended for each designated square footage?
No, I made clear I did not want to include intended use. I said a 25,000 square foot facility, a 40,000 square foot facility, and a 60,000 square foot facility.
Can you turn
Thank
your
you for
microphone on
clarifying.
when you're responding to him, please?
Sorry, I did make clear that it was a 25,000 square foot facility, a 40,000 square foot facility, and a 60,000 square foot facility without naming the intended use. I'm eliminating performing arts center, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you for clarifying.
If I may respond, I will say that will cause some level of complexity and difficulty because as we go out to market seeking someone to do that work, we have to give them some general guidance on the type of facility because, for instance, a performing arts center in the day's market may cost somewhere between $600 to $800 a square foot, where a general office building may cost $250 to $300 a square foot. So we have to be, for us to be able to ensure that we're actually able to deliver something that can be informative for the commission, or excuse me, for the board, we have to be able to have some parameters.
The problem is that
Microphone, please.
sorry, the problem is, City Manager Rogers, is that the moment you add in the Performing Arts Center in all of these categories is the moment you then define what it's going to be. And I think that what people are saying is that the partnership will help define how the space is going to be used, rather than us defining how the space is used. That was the problem I had with the previous motion. If we're saying, as some members have said, that they wish for the partnerships to be with the community, with Addis 14, et cetera, then we need to leave intended use open-ended. Otherwise, we're defining the intended use and the conversation ends here.
Commissioner Hurst.
I completely understand the intent. My issue is similar to what the URA got into with the fifth floor building, fifth floor that we bought. It's, $1 million cost, and now to get it up to a usable space, it's that much more, $1 million more. And so we need to know what we're getting ourselves into from upfront costs. Building a square building at 25, 40,000 or 60,000 square feet could be a significantly different cost than adapting it to the uses that we're going to need it for.
Is there any other discussion? Commissioner Noble.
Commissioner Tedesco had his hand up.
Commissioner
And then
Tedesco.
I'll
I was raising my hand. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify. I think with it, having gone through this on many occasions in my career, I know that RFPs need to be very focused and explicit on what they want. Doing that balance of being flexible and being focused is very difficult. If I might suggest, and I don't know if the motion maker would be amenable to this, but if I might, I think that uses may include such items, but not limited to those items that are listed, may help us broaden and focus the RFP in a way that you may get the answers that you're looking for.
I'm happy to accept that amendment.
Could you please clarify exactly what the amendment is then?
So the amendment is, may include intended uses as listed, but not limited to. So it's may include, but not limited to the intended uses that are listed. That both broadens, I believe, and focuses the RFP in a manner that gives the applicant for the RFP the ability to go out and work with partners and work with those entities that may be beneficial to getting this done.
Thank you for clarifying. I'll accept that.
Commissioner Noble.
Yes.
I have a motion, second, to issue an RFP for a design consultant for a 25,000, 40,000, or 60,000 foot building with estimates of 20,765,000, 29,225,000, or $40,890,000 respectively, that may include the intended uses on the slides in our presentation, but not limit them to. Is there any other discussion? All right, I can't support this the way this is. And right now, we are just creating more hassle and creating more difficulty in trying to figure this out. The original motion said, let's go out and do an RFP and let's figure out how much this is gonna cost and figure out what it's gonna take for a design consultant to get it done, and these are the potential uses. Then we come back and we say, nope, that's not good enough, so instead, let's just issue a blanket RFP and throw that out there. I can tell you in the construction industry, you can't issue a blanket RFP and get anywhere near an estimate of how much it's going to cost. As stated, if you were building for this function, it's going to cost this much a square foot, this function is this much a square foot, and that function. If you don't know the function of what it is that you're building for, you can't put an RFP on the street and figure out how much it's going to cost to build it. So we have to make a decision. Either the decision is we determine first what it is that we're going to build, and then go out for an RFP and figure that out of how much it's going to cost. Or the other option is we say we want to know what everything is going to cost so that we can determine what it is we want to build. And that's pretty much what the first motion went for. This is just, complicating things beyond where they need to be complicated. This is something that should be very simple to decide, how are we going to move forward? But instead, we've spent an hour sitting up here and haven't moved the ball forward an inch. We continue to get bogged down in these same conversations discussing what was promised, what wasn't promised, what is supposed to be done, what was done with funds, what wasn't done with funds, who's going to partner with who, who's going to not partner with who. Nobody knows. And so once again, another month has gone by and we still don't have answers to those questions. So I can't support this motion the way that it's drafted. I think that we need to figure out what it is we're going to do as a URA, figure out what it is that our goals and our intentions are as a URA before we start making decisions on $20 million, $30 million, or $40 million buildings. But until we can figure out what that purpose is going to be and how it is we're going to go forward, we're shooting ourselves in the foot to even consider making decisions like this. Commissioner Noble?
It would have been far easier, of course, had we made a decision in advance about what we wanted to be. But that hasn't been the case, and that isn't on the agenda. If we had a meeting about that topic, that would have been perfect, but we're not having a meeting about that topic. We're not making that determination. So in the meantime, we're being asked to move forward with a design RFP. Let's put that design RFP out there and see what happens and see what we get back. I'd like to call for the vote.
I have a motion to call for the vote. Is there a second? Commissioner Chacon?
A second.
I have a motion and a second to call for the vote. Is there any discussion? I have a motion and a second to call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails 5-5. Is there any other discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing no other discussion on the motion on the table, I have a motion to issue an RFP that asks for a design consultant for a 25,000, 40,000, or 60,000 square foot building with construction estimates of $20,765,000, $29,225,000, or $40,890,000 respectively, that may include the intended uses in the presentation, but does not limit to them. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion is going to pass 8-2. All right, that concludes all the business we have for the URA Authority. Thank you all for being here.
That's right. It's an exercise in futility modified. Thank you for letting me sit next to you.
All right, we're going to reconvene our study session. I'll invite John Borgelli, Management Analyst, to give the presentation on Metro District regulations.
Good seeing you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. I am here tonight to talk to you about my favorite subject, Metro Districts. Our purpose tonight, I'll provide some background information, I'll discuss the listening session we held on Saturday, and then determine next steps and listen to Council's guidance. So Council directed staff to develop regulations on Metro Districts, and staff has engaged in extensive research and analysis. We've retained outside experts and conducted public outreach in order to do so. Those regulations came forward before Council last November. Those have also been included in your packet this evening, and there's a summary of them in the appendix to this presentation, just as a refresher. On December 19th last year, Council passed Ordinance 2453, which imposed a moratorium on new service plans for residential districts. And this is just a general timeline showing how we got here beginning in March of 2021 up until this past weekend and today. I won't bore you by walking through all of that. Council directed staff to conduct a listening session on August 26th. This was designed to hear direct public testimony on Metro Districts and inform Council, give Council the necessary information they need to make a decision as to what to do next. We included options for in-person and virtual engagement. I'm going to quickly flip to, I put together a few slides summarizing, just this morning, summarizing what we heard at the listening session this weekend. You also have a memo that was provided to you earlier today that provides a synopsis from the meeting, from the listening session, as well as some of the survey results that I'll talk about. We had approximately 21 speakers in person. We did have a survey for virtual comments that people could leave, as well as a mentee survey that asked some more detailed questions about the draft regulations and people's views on metro districts that we had 13 people respond to. Again, those results are all included in that memo. So the data that you have, we asked questions both about broad themes, about the need for metro districts, as well as some more specific decision points that council has previously discussed. Some of the major themes that staff heard, and again, we also have notes summarizing more or less what we heard from each speakers, but the three major themes that we heard, the biggest one was homeowner representation, making sure that homeowners have a voice in the process, making sure that they have the ability to affect change on their boards, and that boards controlled by developers are not making unilateral decisions that homeowners will not be able to change and that they will have to live with for decades. Another thing that we heard was continued oversight, making sure that the city is continuing to examine service plans after they're approved, making sure that districts are operating in compliance with those service plans, as well as relevant local, state laws. And the final thing we heard was the need for increased transparency. At every step of the process, from when people are looking to initially buy homes to when they move in and are living there, that there's a need for more transparency and disclosure, as well as continued education for residents, so everyone knows exactly what it is that they're getting into. That brings us to the study session this evening and council's action. Council at this point can direct staff to bring an ordinance adopting the draft regulations that were considered last year, and that's pending any changes that council desires based on this additional input they have received, if there are changes or amendments they would like to see. Council could continue the moratorium as it currently exists, or council could choose to lift the moratorium. At this time, I will open it to any questions or comments from council. Thank you.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I appreciate the event on Saturday. I thought it was a really good idea, not just for this topic, for maybe even future topics. And unfortunately, I forgot my whole notebook that had 3 pages of notes, but I did kind of refresh a lot of the key points that I thought were really good ideas or really good conversation pieces from Saturday. And couple of the things that I think we may need to further this discussion is understanding a couple things. I don't disagree on anything that you said. I heard lots of really good comments around what we should and shouldn't have. Obviously, oversight and education were key themes. The kind of parent-child idea, I don't think anybody supported. I'm not sure I've ever heard anybody support that. But one of the things that I would really love to understand that I think needs to get added to this conversation, or maybe not, maybe I'm just wrong, but what are the standard city responsibilities for horizontal construction and public improvements during development? Meaning, like a lot of times we'll have requirements for the development to develop their side of the street, but in order to keep safety standards and things like that, there'll be times where we have to add sidewalk, drainage, gutter, all of those things to the other side of the street as well. In that scenario, that is the city's responsibility, but likely there is a development plan agreement that outlines the contractor or the developer themselves to complete that work using some type of funding that the city provides. What I'd like to understand is where that funding comes from. I believe sometimes it might be the NIGID. If we're talking about development in the north, it sometimes may be other sources depending on where the development's at. But are there ever situations where the Metro District itself is taking on those cost burdens that the city would be, or the city responsibility comes from? So I'd like to understand how that's worked out. Obviously, I know there's agreements and, but agreements with who? Like, who's making those agreements? Because obviously the city has some say in those agreements, but they're doing it with the developer that's not necessarily representing the folks that are going to be living in that neighborhood in the future. So want to have a better understanding there and how those responsibilities are placed on metro districts. What's the, there's several ideas around, instead of, creating individual metro districts, why isn't the NIGID or other similar GID districts utilized? I think there's lots of discussion around that, but I think there just needs to be a better understanding about that. One of the key things I thought was brought up is the Tabor amendments that occurred in the 96-97 timeframe. I can't remember, so I put both years. And then I wanted to understand the growth vote. I have, since being on council, often heard of this growth vote that was around 99, 2000, where the idea of growing and continuing to grow kind of to the size that we see in our growth area was voted on by, at that time, really the only southern side of the city was, had anybody living there. What does that mean? Obviously, I continue to hear that that growth vote was a yes vote for growth, but growth had to pay for itself. I think that's a pretty easy discussion to have in a general sense, but what are the details of that and how do they matter? Meaning, I guess what that means to me is that we can't use general tax funds to do any project in the north in terms of that coincides with growth. It's happening only because of the growth in the area. That means it has to be funded outside of our normal general fund budget or even our budget that we're doing big projects on, our capital budget. So what are our options? Outside of GIDs, I don't know that there's any other clear option for us to fund this, to fund the city's responsibilities. And so I want to understand that as well to make sure that we're considering that. I'm not saying anything's being done wrong, but I do want to have a better understanding or at least a discussion around that. And then there was some, I think, going back to the meeting itself, Mr. Japp came up with or presented some ideas about how to properly set up the board when it's first created. So there's equal representation from developers and people who represent the city. So essentially the near future residents to make sure that we can get into a flat tax rate opposed to a cash flow bond situation and looking at how to control that from the front side and kind of take over that resident controlled board as soon as possible by having those seats kind of already taken by either city council members or someone who's representing the city. Obviously, those details could be worked out. So besides that, I think there were some really good other discussions that were kind of already touched on by you, and so I won't go too much more detail.
Thank you, sir. We can work to get you answers to some of those questions.
Are there any other comments or questions? Councilmember Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor Huisman. My takeaway is that there are a lot of unhappy people in our community, and they're not happy about the situation that we're in. Seeing outrageously high taxes that they are obligated to pay, and some of them being literally taxed out of their homes. A lot of people noticing lots of residential growth, but no balance as far as services. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to be able to listen to the citizens, for them to not be cut off at 3 minutes, but for them to have a full 5 minutes to speak. And that included the council people who wrapped it up, who were in attendance. I think we got a lot of self-examination to do. And I think that's going to require that we maintain the moratorium for this particular time period until we can get a grip on where we are and what it is we need to do forward to make it right in the future. And that was my takeaway.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you. It was really an edifying afternoon, no question about it. And several things came to mind, including everyone, as Councilmember Hurst said, being opposed to parent-child relationships and how incorrect that terminology is, because no parent would ever treat their child the way some metro districts treat their property owners. So we do need to avoid that in the future. I believe that our draft plan included options for potentially a parent-child. One of the attorneys for the Reunion Metro District appeared for us. I will never forget her standing at the podium to say only 2% of metro districts in Colorado have parent-child relationships, and that it is falling out of favor. It wasn't long after that law firm was fired from that metro district. So I don't think that went over well, but I think it's something we need to look at. The problem is, of course, is that some of our worst issues involve agreements that were already made in the past. And we can't unring that bell unless there is a material modification or, I believe, a material violation. I'd like to ask for our city attorney to look into that for us, what the options are regarding material modification or material violation of a service plan. I think it's critically important for us to have someone on staff who is literally making certain that oversight is occurring with all of these metro districts. We have over 60 metro districts in Commerce City. Some of the metro districts have fees that impact our ability to attract retail to Commerce City. Retailers are concerned about paying the same high district fees that many of us do. I thought it was really important that some metro districts have a method where if the valuation on the home has risen, and I don't think the question in the survey actually addressed this in the way that these metro districts do it, but when the valuation increases, then they reduce the mills so that the homeowners aren't hit with extra fees. There were 2 metro districts, according to one of the speakers, where when the valuation occurs, there is no change to the mills. That would be Reunion Metro District and Buffalo Highlands Metro District. All other metro districts reduce their mills in order for the property owners to not be impacted by that increase. There's also a question on my mind about marketing. If a developer comes to us to ask for a service plan and they make their presentation, they do a beautiful slide presentation and they're telling us what they have planned for their area and make all sorts of commitments regarding their plan, and then the city council votes to approve that service plan, why doesn't the developer have any obligation to actually fulfill the promises that were made to the city council in order to win approval. I can make up any pie in the sky thing if I want somebody to say yes to me and then turn around and do something entirely different. There should be some sort of obligation, and I would like that looked into too by the city attorney's office, how people, how any developer might get out of having that occur. I think that it was also made clear that all metro districts should have contiguous borders so that you don't have a metro district here and then one several miles away, and they're all part of the same oversight. Certainly, they wanted residents to be able to vote early, to have a role, that it was taxation without representation was mentioned many times, and they want the residents to be able to vote. And at what point can residents become part of the conversation? We really need to figure out some way for our for us to be part of the mill levy to pay for oversight. I think that's critically important. I think it was mentioned by Councilmember Hurst that government improvement districts can't be used, but in fact they can be for infrastructure. So if you separate out the infrastructure part so that roads are being done, et cetera, then perhaps you could go forward with a metro district. It was explained by some residents that I think people more so who were involved in the metro district world, that they had turned their HOAs or rolled their HOAs into metro districts because people weren't paying their HOA fees, and there wasn't much that an HOA could do about it. However, if your HOA fees become part of your metro district costs, that becomes part of your property taxes, and it's much harder not to pay that. I thought that was interesting. There is something that didn't come up, but I think is really important. In Colorado Springs, district boundaries with little or no assessed valuation shall not be maintained throughout the life of a project for the sole purpose of maintaining control of a developer board. Wow, that would be really important to include in new language. And of course, we need to have an independent eye on who is retained. If they're going to do their own infrastructure, who is it that they're retaining? Are they swapping contractors between developers, or are they getting the best bid? Because ultimately, when it's said that the developer is paying for blank, it is the homeowner who will eventually pay for it through the metro district. I have one other thing in this portion to say, which is that we do have a parcel of land in Commerce City that is bordered by Commerce City, but is in unincorporated Adams County. And that is at the corner of 96th and Tower. That developer would like to do housing and also commercial in that area, which I think would be attractive. Certainly the commercial would be attractive. I can't guarantee you more housing would be attractive if you talk to residents, but certainly commercial would be. But this particular developer, when we asked whether there were any metro districts in the pipeline when we did the moratorium, wasn't mentioned because he was in unincorporated Adams County. I don't know if there could be an exception, but even if there is an exception, we would have to come up with rules for this particular one. Otherwise, I agree that this remains complex in a way that needs as much discussion as possible, mostly because we have seen every mistake that could occur on a sizable magnitude here in Commerce City, and I would hate to see any residents in the future suffer the same impacts that our residents are. Thank you.
Councilmember Kim.
A lot was said, so I'll do my best to keep this brief. I attended the Metro District meeting. I think some of there's definitely a lot of frustration that's out there currently. I do have a question for the city attorney, but I'll ask that at the end. A couple of things that I will note. First off, my bottom line up front is the fact that I think this moratorium should remain in place until we get this figured out. As far as for other new metro districts, I think something that I mentioned on Saturday, I'll mention again tonight. A couple of the things, key points I think we need to have is more of a clear vision to basically defining the goals and objectives, a comprehensive plan that outlines the governance frameworks, budget, process, service delivery, transparency with residents and partners. Stakeholder engagement, again, transparency and collective feedback with residents, local businesses, addressing concerns, allowing for community involvement. Financial management is big as well. I think there needs to be transparency amongst partner stakeholders and residents. Service delivery, water, sewage, waste, transportation. According to our city website, it says development of land creates new or increased demands on city facilities and services, including schools, roads, water, parks, and recreation facilities. The cost of providing such additional services and facilities should be borne by those who create the need. Accordingly, developers are required to contribute toward meeting the increased public service need. Number 6 I have here is regarding collaboration with local authorities. We want to have a good working relationship with residents, local government, sharing info, community, and partners. And finally, the last thing I talked about was regarding continuous evaluation and improvement, assessing feedback performance, basically give it a couple of months, determine what that looks like, and then come back to it to obtain that feedback. We did receive a lot of information from residents overall. Obviously, like I said, a lot of the rest of the council has said it as well. There was definitely a lot of issues. A lot of them just wants to see elimination altogether. I know it's not possible for us to eliminate, but we can control what we can moving forward, right? I think, the biggest things I hear Mr. Rogers say, the word that really sticks out in my mind is partnership. Partnership. That's a big thing for me. I think we really need to go in and create that partnership amongst everybody, have that full-on transparency with not just with the government, but also with residents as well alike. It's unfortunate that we've had some negative issues, I'll say, with other areas that has come down to where when you do have real developers, real people who want to come and actually do good by the city, they're caught in this crossfire. So obviously, I think from my standpoint, I think we really do need to come up with a good solution and to determine, do I think this moratorium should stay in place forever? No, I don't think so. I do think that we can create something that will essentially provide that checks and balances, that will not have that taxation without representation. To City Attorney, Interim City Attorney, Ms. Geiger, my question to you is, could the city appoint council members on a developing Metro District Board to ensure there is a checks and balances between the city and future homeowners until there's enough homeowners essentially to take over?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Kim. I'm going to actually call on outside counsel, Mr. Kelly, to respond to your question in greater length. I will say one of the stumbling blocks I can see to that, and again, Mr. Kelly can expand on this, would be that the board members by statute would need to be an eligible elector of the Metro District area. There is a relatively broad definition of eligible elector, which would include an entity that owns property in the Metro District, so perhaps that's something to explore, but I'll let Mr. Kelly go ahead and expand on that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Dalton Kelly with Butler Snow. We work with the city on Metro districts and as well as other financial matters. Interim City Attorney Geiger is right. The biggest issue is it's eligible electors who can sit on the board. There's not a mechanism for appointment to the Metro District boards. I do know that Denver has some unique structures with a couple Metro districts that we could look at, but the biggest hurdle is statutorily eligible electors or who can sit on the board. And so you would have to have people that check that box. What I will say is, and it's been mentioned a little bit, and this is something that, should be part of the discussion, is there are other mechanisms for providing infrastructure, other types of districts. General improvement districts have been mentioned. The board of a general improvement district is the city council. A special improvement district that uses special assessments rather than property taxes, that board would also be the city council. Metro districts themselves have the ability to do special improvement districts and special assessments. And so they also have the ability to finance infrastructure other than through property taxes. And so I know of one municipality that's looking at that. And so there are ways to finance infrastructure and there are different ways to do it. And I think some of what we can talk about is what options are available. But as far as metro districts go, there's just not an appointment power where the city council could step in and appoint people to the board.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kelly. So my other question then would be is the fact that if the owner of the land essentially was willing to indulge in that conversation to allow that to happen, is that lawfully applicable? I mean, can that work? Would that work?
I think what we could explore, because the city has the ability to do this. You have advisory boards all the time. The one thing that we will run up against is, you could have an advisory board, you could require it, but ultimately these are quasi-governmental entities that have their own legislative discretion, much like the city council does. And so I think what we're going to run into problems with is ultimately who can make decisions and who are the decision makers. I think the best way to actually control the board is looking at other structures, if you're going to use metro districts in the city, wants that one area where the city can appoint the board is if you created authorities. And so you can do separate governmental authorities where the board would be made up of eligible electors of the metro district plus, city appointment. But again, that would take an additional step and it takes an additional layer of creation to do something like that. So I do think there are ways that we can look at getting there. But as far as the traditional metro district structure, outside of having advisory boards, it's tough to get to that binding board kind of deal that the statute doesn't contemplate.
Copy all. Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. I think this is definitely going to be a broader discussion that still needs to continue on, that we should look into what Mr. Kelly had mentioned along with Ms. Geiger and continue on these discussions. But again, I stand by what I said earlier is until we can get our act together to make sure be able to better regulate as much as we can, I would like to stick with the moratorium at this time. That's all. Thank you.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, like I said, I forgot my notes. There was a couple good points that I wanted to expand on, and I'll be quick. I think during the same discussion about contiguous borders, I think Ronna Sanchez brought up that the property needs to be 5 acres or larger to be considered a metro district. I think that's a good consideration when we're talking about, making sure that the people who live there have the opportunity to control the board. What Mr. Kelly just brought up, I thought was interesting. It's something that the mayor brings up often in this discussion, and I think it's a valid discussion to at least consider as we move forward. When we're talking about, having a role early on the board, we know by development requirement, that the streets are going to be turned over to us. It's 2 years. There's a 2-year warranty on that. That's still required, but I think that designates ownership for us early in the process. We know by contractual demand or contractual agreement that those roads are ours. Yes, you're building them, you're required to warranty them for 2 years, but in reality, the ownership is ours based off of that contractual agreement. right then and there, I believe we have property rights in that discussion, and we should be able to have a board member, at least a board member, to be able to represent those property rights to ensure that the public property that will be turned over to us is managed properly, and we don't, and we're also financially responsible in that process of development of it. So I don't expect anybody to have an answer on that. I just think that's a really good discussion point, because I think it does address some of the issues. It's a combination of addressing several issues that we've discussed over the years that we've been talking about this. Talking to or listening to kind of some of the others, I think we really need a combination of a really good accountant and a really good lawyer to understand, you know, if compliance is being had. Like if we're going to do oversight, it's going to require some level of knowledge and complexity that both comes from an accounting standpoint and a legal standpoint. So it may not just be one person. I think those are two key areas. Understanding the law and how these things work, I think, will be key from an oversight perspective. We heard multiple business owners talk on Saturday, but one of them was talking to me afterwards and talking about that they're going to get me their tax bill, but they're paying $70,000 a year into their Metro District taxes. That's not including the other taxes that they pay to the city. But $70,000 a year for a pretty, it's a fairly small business in my estimation. It starts to paint the picture of why it's hard to bring small businesses here. And so I really think we have to figure out how to dial that in. And that goes hand in hand with the last point I'd like to make. We heard someone talk about them being in their house for 19 years. And they're paying more, not less. 19 years later, if you paid $5,000 a year, what is your fair share? I mean, at 20 years, at 30 years, have you paid your fair share in? But if we're starting new developments 19 years in that have a 30-year life to pay them off, I mean, paying 49 years seems pretty ridiculous when the person who moves in 15 years into that new project that was a 30-year finance, they're only going to pay 15 years of the life of that debt ever. Then it's all done, right? But the person who moved there first, who really committed to the city day one that we started building that development, they're 49 years in by the end. We have to cap that somehow. We can't ask someone to pay 49 years into, a development while everybody else is paying 15, 20, 25. Once you pay your share, you should be done. I just don't see how we continue to ask people to pay. We're incentivizing people to leave. That's all I'm really getting at. It's like there is no good reason for you to stay and pay for 50 years if you've already paid your fair share. And then if you paid your fair share, you should be able to use those amenities and those services forever. You've paid into them. You've paid your fair share. So establishing what a fair share is may be tough to do because you're thinking about inflation and all the other things that can happen over the 30-year life of a mortgage or anything else that we're talking about that we usually get into agreement as homeowners. That's pretty incredible to ask somebody to continue to pay into new bond debt or new development debt even after they paid long-term for the whole time that they've lived there. So I think that's something we have to also talk about, also rein in. There's really a limited incentive, and it's putting all the incentive on the people who are moving here at the very end of the development to hang out and wait until it's that time. That's the best time to buy.
Councilmember Herbst, sorry. Mayor, I may just respond to that first question with respect to the property and the public improvements. And Mr. Kelly can correct me if I'm wrong, but one stumbling block I see is that the statute refers specifically to owners of taxable property, and public property wouldn't be taxable. And I think the idea is that, the eligible electors should be those who are kind of bearing the burden, or however you want to phrase it, of the taxes within the district. So I'm not sure kind of how to play with that with respect to the public property and improvements.
I'm sorry. I was just going to add to that is, unlike a couple of the other types of districts, like a business improvement district, even businesses don't get to appoint somebody to be their eligible elector. And so that's kind of one of the things that's in some of these other structures that's not with metro districts. And so that's one of the stumbling blocks. That's not saying we can't find ways to get accountability and to look at that. But just as far as it just presents another issue for getting people on the board. But I will comment real quick on, because I've heard this come up before and with the city council as well, is, between transparency and trying to level out payments and knowing what you're going to pay and when you're done and what's your share. I mentioned special improvement districts and special improvements being a power that you could either do through the city or through a metro district. Those are upfront. They're specifically tied to the benefit that the property, that the improvement confers on the property. You can pay them up front or over 20 years, and it has to be done by a method that shows what the special benefit was of that improvement. And so just as far as leveling out payments and another way to finance things, that's another option that's out there that's used in states like Nevada. It hasn't picked up as much in Colorado. It's been used a little bit. But that's part of the statute that I know at least another municipality is looking at, not authorizing mill levies for debt, but making metro districts use special assessments. And so, as you're learning and looking through things, I'd encourage you to take a look at that, because it sounds like that might check a lot of boxes for what you mentioned you would like to see.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you bringing up the SIDS and LIDS model. That's something actually I've been talking about for over 4 years now, of the idea that put the actual cost of that infrastructure on the house, and then it's up to the homeowner. When they pay off their portion of it, it's done, instead of it continuing to be in the model that it is. Currently, the way that the model exists, you can pay those 20 years, and then the developer can come along and his developer-controlled metro district board and refinance all your bonds and reset the clock on you, and away you go for another 40 years, and you don't have a say in the matter. That's happened to a couple neighborhoods in our community, and it's a shame, and it ought to be criminal, the fact that it's taken place. So, I think it's refreshing to hear that people are of the idea that you should be in control of your own destiny like that. One of the ways you're in control of your own destiny is you roll the price of that infrastructure into the price of the house, and you let the people decide whether or not they want to purchase the house or not. Councilmember Noble?
Thank you. I just wanted to go back for just a minute to improvement districts, and I'm glad you're talking about that, Mr. Kelly. That's really important. I would rather see the city do infrastructure than see the developer do infrastructure. And there was a great story, or a great story in a bad way, told on Saturday about a project where the developer bought the property for $5 million, put in $17 million worth of infrastructure, sold to builders for $48 million, and then $17 million was put in the bond for the Metro District. So in essence, the developer made $17 million twice, because quite clearly the developer was selling improved property, improved with the infrastructure, for which he received $48 million. He would not have received $48 million had he not done the $17 million in infrastructure. That $17 million wound up being paid by the homeowners who are part of the Metro District, and they're stuck with the bond where they may be talking about, the developers seem to want 40 years or 45 years, but they shouldn't be any longer, if there is a bond, any longer than a mortgage, because for each year you add on interest, you are actually costing the homeowner far more. It's like taking out a car for a 3-year loan or a 5-year loan, and instead you get talked into a 7-year loan. Next thing you know, you've paid twice for your car. So it's important for us to also limit that. I know that we can add on to the price of the home. There were some people who threatened that it would add $50,000 or $100,000 to the price of a home, but developers choose, or builders choose, a price that the market bears. So I actually don't think that that threat holds much water. And I did want to ask Mr. Kelly, since you're here, I think you popped on while I was speaking. I didn't notice you before. I was asking earlier about a developer who makes promises in their presentation in order to win approval of the service plan, and then doesn't perform on the aspects of it that weren't written into the agreement. They probably weren't written into the agreement because it's the smoke and mirrors part of the project, the parts that'll be beautiful, how beautiful the park will be, for example, or how wonderful the commercial district will be. Is there any recourse that a city has to hold that developer accountable for the promises that were made originally in order to win approval of the service plan?
Yeah, thanks, Councilmember Noble, for that question. So, the difficulty with this is and these lines get blurred a lot, but the service plan isn't a development approval. And so the service plan is it's a document of limitation on what powers the Metro District has. And it doesn't sign off on any sort of development. It's not a development approval, and those come later. So where the rubber meets the road on this is, what are you going to require the developer to have approval-wise, and what has to be in place before the Metro Districts can issue debt? And I think that's your biggest way of controlling it, because the Metro Districts are really only useful as the financing tool. And so if you can't finance until you check certain boxes, then that helps. The difficulty is then once you hit your final plat or you have a development agreement, they're going to go issue the bonds and the money's out there, and now you're waiting on them to perform. I think where that's handled then is your development agreements. And so these things have to work together, because ultimately a service plan is not a development approval, but it can work. It's tied to development approvals in some way if you're holding up how much their debt limit is, or things when they can issue. And so I think there's room in the service plan, but ultimately holding a developer accountable, because the service plan regulates the quasi-municipal governmental entity. If you really want recourse against the developer, it's through your development agreement, but you can limit their ability to use tools if they aren't performing, or if they haven't checked the boxes that you want them to check before they issue debt. And so I think thinking about those two things together and how you can make them work together is how to accomplish that goal.
So we can make the requirements in the service plan far more detailed than we have been in the past.
I think so, and we can be strategic about when can they issue debt? Are there limitations on how much debt can be issued if it's a multi-phase project? Or there's ways to think about it. We're going to get pushback about what the market will bear. That's always going to be what's asked, and that's the push we're going to get. But I do know across the metro area, there's varying triggers on how far along you have to be to issue debt. I know the city of Brighton gets a lot deeper into development approvals and what public improvements are going to exist than other cities do before they approve a plan. And so I think there's just building your criteria on when you will approve a service plan, and then when those powers are available under the service plan. I think those are your two timelines to think about.
Well, it would be good to include every possible best practices that every city has come up with. Thank you.
So, Mr. Kelly, I think that there's some confusion over the question that was asked versus the answer that you were provided. And each time that a service plan is approved, there's a public hearing that takes place. The developer stands in the middle of the public hearing and makes certain comments regarding what is going to be done in the public hearing for getting that service plan approved. And then the developer reneges and does not actually fulfill the obligations that they promised to during a public hearing. So I think Councilmember Noble was trying to determine what recourse a community has on that developer who made statements during a public hearing and then turned around and went back on it and didn't fulfill what they promised.
As far as recourse under the service plan, that's what I was talking about. There's just, as far as recourse under the service plan goes, what the service plan is creating the governmental entity. It's not the developer's document. It's not a planning document. As far as statements made at a public hearing and whether those were true and accurate, I would defer to your city attorney on recourse available there, given that that's outside our expertise. But as far as the service plan goes, it's a document of limitation for what the Metro District can do. It's not a development approval. And so what my suggestion is if you're going to want the development approvals to track what's in the service plan, then you need those two documents to work together so that you know more so what you're getting, or you have recourse under that development agreement, because you're in privity with the developer with the development agreement. The service plan is just one step on this governmental entity getting created, and so you don't have this privity of contract. You can do IGAs with the Metro District, and a lot of cities do that, and that'll give you some contractual rights. And so if you start building in, you will build these improvements to 56th Avenue, and you will do this and that, then you'd have recourse against the district. But as far as the service plan goes, what is promised and what is put out in the public hearing, because it's not a development approval, you're not signing off like you would with a zoning or building specs sort of thing, where you would have that recourse on as built.
Thank you. Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, quickly as a follow-up to the discussion around ownership of the streets, the issue that I have there is that there is taxable valuation on it. And what I mean by that is the city will then collect taxes forever to maintain those streets. And so there's some value there. I understand what you're saying. There's not a taxable property value. The city doesn't pay tax back to itself, the county, or the state for the property that the roads are on. But in all reality, we're still taxing on the valuation there because we have to maintain those roads. One of the things that, case in point, properly run Metro District, in my interpretation, would have funding to repave its roads as part of its ability to continue to, to take out a loan, basically. And so there are situations where, the service plan, and this is a lot lower numbers, I'm just making an example, the service plan approves $10 million in approval, but 10 years in, they have $15 million of borrowing power, and they can, kind of take that out incrementally and continue to hold $10 million of debt for a long time. If you were doing that in favor of the residents, that would be preparing to make these general infrastructure improvements beyond your debt payments. Say you paid off your original infrastructure debt. So what I see happening is, even in the best case scenarios, Metro districts pay off their debt, their bond debt from their original infrastructure build out. Now the city owns their roads and is collecting very, very minimal tax collections on that, and are still responsible for maintaining their roads, because 2 years after that build out happened, those were turned over to the city, and now it's their responsibility for all perpetuity to maintain those roads. And so there is a pretty significant tax void there on how we're going to maintain that infrastructure if we're not doing so with the bond debt and with the borrowing power of that Metro District moving forward beyond its original bond debt payments.
Councilmember Kim.
Thank you, Mayor. I would be remiss to also say that, with any future service plans, Metro District, whatever the case is, I want to ensure that we are not taxing the South for North's improvements. Want to make sure that that is clear. If it's not, please let me know. To Councilmember Hurst's point, as far as who the 19-year homeowner was, that was Mr. Anthony Stellato. And I also appreciate former Mayor Busby, I believe, David Busby, who came up and spoke as well. Two things I want to make sure that I have a comment, and two other things I want to make sure that we're looking at as well. Mr. Wolfersberger spoke, yes, on Saturday. He mentioned as far as how much borrowing authority there was within the North Range Metro Districts 1 and 2. Currently, the borrowing authority for North Range Metro District 1 is about $692 million that could be borrowed against. And for North Range Metro District 2, currently has $1.2 billion with a B of borrowing authority that that can be pulled out without any form of representation. I think what I would like to see as well is regarding as far as with what Title 32 looks like, what type of impacts does it have against, or what is it that, how does Title 32 essentially provide oversight with regard to the authorized review of some form of voter debt? And then Mr. Wolfersberger mentioned about something about cash flow bonds, something the city could look at, could be damaging to residents, especially with the, it could potentially hurt homeowners due to valuation increases. For more information on that, I would defer to Mr. Wolfersberger to obtain what exactly he meant by that, and he'll give you a 3-hour speech on it. But that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Noble.
Sorry, Mr. Kelly. I asked earlier about material modifications or material violations. Is that terminology included in service plans?
Yeah, and so Title 32 sets forth what a material modification is. It's essentially a change of a basic or essential nature, and they give a couple examples. What most municipalities do is they enumerate certain things under the service plan that are a material modification. So beyond what maybe the statutory criteria would say is a material modification, so usually issuing debt above the debt limit, going above your mill levy, max mill levy limit, those sorts of things you would put in the service plan that they are a material modification. And so it is something defined in statute. It's also something that has been, with the service plan being a documented limitation and identifying what the powers are. I've seen people enumerate what they view as a material modification, which is your gateway to, as the city, to having recourse and oversight. Generally speaking, that comes down to enjoining whatever action it is so that they can no longer take it. That's typically the what the statute provides for. You could call it, if you have an IGA, you can also have contractual rights, and so you can sue them and contract you if there's a material modification. So,
Okay, and there was a claim that one of the metro districts had exceeded its debt and still had build out to do. So, who would we talk to about that in order to see if the service plan includes that kind of information? Our city attorney then?
yeah, so you would look at the service plan to see what the debt limit is. And I've looked at some of these issues with Ms. Geiger as they've come across. So we look at what has been authorized under the service plan. You would have to look at what has been issued. And then if there was a 45-day notice given to try to flag what might have been a material modification. The hard thing with debt, if it hasn't been issued yet, there's things you can do. If it's already been issued, there's really not much you can do because of the way the statutes work. And so what other municipalities have done on this front is also start to require an opinion of council that they're within the service plan limits, and usually providing bond documents before debt is issued so that you can check the limits before it's issued, because you can't really put the genie back in the bottle after it's out there.
Okay. And I did learn one other thing at the meeting that was a surprise, which is that South Adams County Water and Sanitation District's fees are quite high compared to the rest of the region, which is also an issue impacting retail in our area. So I thought I should just throw that in. We did have a couple of residents who came to speak on other issues that were of concern to them, particularly in South Commerce City. And I think we certainly took away from it that having these sessions on Saturday afternoons seemed to be really valuable in general. And we had far more people come to this than came to the town halls or to a city council meeting or a study session. So I hope that we can continue to find topics of interest to Commerce City residents so that they come and share their ideas with us. Thank you.
All right, that concludes all the business that we have for the evening. We'll see you in 2 weeks for...
Mr. Mayor, if I may, So is the consensus of council then that we should return with regulations that address some of the feedback we hear this evening, or to continue the moratorium?
Both. Have a good night. We'll see you September 11th. What's that?
There's nothing you can do.